You're welcome.
Good evening, Maddie.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you're live, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this North Western Area Planning Committee meeting today, Wednesday the 16th of December 2020. My name is Councillor Mrs Maddie Thompson and I'm the Chairman of this committee. The meeting is held under regulations which came into effect on the 4th of April in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So there are a few housekeeping issues just to run through. First of all, could I please ask everyone present in this meeting to ensure your microphone remains muted and your video feed off. We're not addressing the committee. Actually, I thought we'd change that, but we haven't yet, have we? This will reduce background noises and avoid any unintentional disturbances. The meeting will be hosted remotely via conferencing software. This allows members of the public to attend virtually and whilst being able to protect themselves and to observe the government's lockdown measures. We're streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to being recorded. Members and officers, during each item, please use the chat function of the meeting to indicate if you wish to speak, and I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Members are reminding that apart from indicating you wish to speak or that you have to leave the meeting, the chat function should not be used for any other purpose, including questions, because it's not available to members of the public. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please ensure you reference a page or paragraph number and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. When invited to speak, please ensure you turn on your microphone and your video. Please, may I ask officers taking part in the meeting to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Lee, please.
Good evening, Chairman. My name is Matthew Lee and I am Lead Specialist Place and Chief Plan Officer at Morden District Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Right, Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson here?
He's not here today, Chairman.
Right, okay. Would that be Mr. Lawrence in his doing that role? Or is he just sitting in?
He's just viewing, obviously he's just come back, so he's just getting an idea of the committee.
Okay, how about Ms. Sargent?
Unfortunately, she's unwell, so she's not attending.
I'm working through my list here.
Sorry about this, Chairman.
Right, Ms. Parker-Haynes, I'm pretty sure I did see she's here.
Good evening, I'm Hayley Parker-Haynes and I'm a Senior Caseworker at Morden District Council.
Lovely, thank you. And Ms. Bowles?
Good evening, I'm Hannah Bowles and I'm a Specialist in Development Management.
Lovely, thank you. And Katie, but it isn't Katie, is it? It's Tara is our committee clerk.
That's right, Chairman. Good evening. It's me, Tara Bird, Committee Services Officer for the evening. Thank you. That's
lovely. Any other officers present to take part in the meeting as distinct from supporting in IT? Okay, I'll take that as a no then. So could we please have a roll call of the members present, committee members to start with, and we'll do the anyone attending in a minute. Thank you.
Yes, Chairman, members, when I call your name, if you could just confirm if you're in attendance, please. Starting with Councillor Durham, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you see and hear me?
Certainly can.
We can.
Thank you very much indeed. And I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Fleming?
Present, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis?
Thank you, Tara. Chairman, present.
Thank you. Councillor Keys?
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, members and people who are witnessing. I'm present. Thank you, Tara.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Morley?
Good evening, everyone. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle?
Good evening, Tara. Present.
Good evening. Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson's present. Councillor Miss White?
I'm afraid.
Good evening, everybody.
Oh, you are here. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. So I was about to give your apologies in case you hadn't made it home yet.
Thank you, Chairman. And could I just ask if there's any members in attendance, please?
Hello, Tara. Yes, I'm present. Councillor Penny Channer.
Thank you, Ms.
Hello, Councillor. Is that the only one? Okay. Thank you very much. Chairman. So apologies for absence.
We don't have any, Chairman. Everyone's here.
No, everyone's here. Excellent. Thank you. One thing I do have to note is we've had an application has been withdrawn. There was some technical issues with it, so it will come back at another time. And that one is number 20/01021. I'll have to find that in a minute, but I'm sure if it's your application you were interested in, you'll find that. I'm sorry about that. This was a bit of a last minute thing. Item 3 is the minutes from the 18th of November, the previous meeting. It's recommended the minutes of the meeting held on 18th of November 2020, found on pages 9 to 12, are approved as a true and accurate record. I so move. If you wish to second that motion, please turn on your video and unmute and state your name. Somebody?
Second, Councillor Fleming.
Lovely, thank you very much. If any member wishes to raise any matters of accuracy, can you please just indicate on the chat that you'd like to speak? I'll take that as a no. Can we accept those by assent, members? If you don't agree, please let me know sooner rather than later. So, okay. Everyone agreed?
Great.
Lovely.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Right. Item 4, declarations of interest. I'm afraid I have to read this out. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other pecuniary interests, or non-pecuniary interests relating to items of business on the agenda having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8 inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded they're also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware, should the need arise through the meeting. If any member has an interest to declare, please use the chat function now to indicate, and I will ask you to speak.
Chairman, Councillor Siddle has indicated.
Councillor Siddle, yes, I was just wondering where on the list I've got to. Councillor Siddle, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest as I am a resident of Little Totham and also Chairman of Little Totham Parish Council pertaining to agenda item number 5. Okay,
thank you very much. Anybody else? There's usually Councillor Durham about now.
Yes, I've actually got a golden hand raised, Chairman.
So you have.
But yes, thank you. A non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council, because they are statutory consultees on various aspects of the planning process. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a very vague non-pecuniary interest in that I know all sorts of people who are speaking here this evening, but only through parish council work, not through anything else. So that applies to the Goldhanger application and the Tollsbury one. Councillor Keys, did you want to say something?
Yes, good evening. We're just a non-pecuniary. I'll sit on Great Totham Parish Council. And yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you. I think that's everyone. Right, so we are moving on now to the first planning item, which is item 5 on the agenda. It's land south of Beckenham Business Park, Beckenham Street, Tolton Major. And we do have a public speaker, which will...
Ms Bowles will be doing this one because it was Ms Sargent.
Yes, right. Okay. Sorry, I've got... Apparently the chairman can hardly hear anyone else. Who can't hear?
I think you're quite muffled, apparently, Chairman.
Ah, okay.
I can hear, okay?
I'm very sorry, I'll shout.
Yes, so can I. I can hear.
I can hear you clearly, don't worry.
Sorry, that's to do with YouTube, sorry. It's YouTube, it's for the public viewing it.
Okay, okay. Right, the item is found on pages 13 to 64. There is a member's update circulated. If anyone needs a minute to find that and read it, please let me know. We can have the report and then the speakers, and then I'll move on to the recommendation and the debate. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. So planning permission is sought for the erection of 13 business and general industrial units, an office block and a cafe with related infrastructure including a road, parking spaces, drainage, landscaping and an ecological area. Here we have the location plan. There were previously 3 large fruit washing drums on the site. Whilst the structures have been removed, the concrete bases remain in place. Here's an aerial view of the site. The access is taken from Beckenham Street, and the development would utilise and extend the existing access track which serves Beckenham Business Park through here. Here is the block plan. Building A, which is along here, and Building B are proposed to accommodate the industrial units. Building C, which is here in the pink, is the proposed office block, and the cafe is located centrally in this area here. The land to the southwest of the site would be utilised for ecological mitigation and a drainage area. We have the proposed ground and first floor plans for Block A, which contains 5 of the industrial units, and the proposed elevation and section of Block A. Here we have the proposed ground floor plan and section for Block B, which would contain 8 industrial units, and the first floor plan for Block B, and the proposed elevations for Block B. Here are the proposed floor, roof and section plans for the proposed office block, and the proposed elevations for the office block. Then here are the proposed elevations and floor plans for the cafe. We have a soft landscaping plan. You can see the areas of grass in green. And the landscaping plan continued to show the area to the southwest of the site. We have the hard landscaping plan. The darker grey is the access road and the lighter grey are the parking spaces. And the hard landscaping plan continued. The only hard landscaping proposed in the southwest area is a pathway here. And then we have some site photos.
Has he done it?
Sorry?
And some
Councillor Durham, your microphone's on.
Someone's not muted. Someone's not muted, members.
And then we have some illustrative photographs as well. The application site is a designated employment site and the area which contains the proposed built form is allocated employment land. The site is located within the development boundary of Toll St Major, and the ecological mitigation and drainage area is supported by policy N2 of the LDP. Therefore, there's no objection to the principle of the development. The proposed development is considered to have an acceptable visual impact, would not detrimentally impact residential amenity, and no objection has been raised in terms of access or highway safety by the Highway Authority. The proposal would result in economic benefits to the locality and provide new high quality employment units and generate jobs in line with policy E1 of the LDP, as well as the guidance contained within the MPPF. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, we have 3 public participants for this planning application. In line with the participation scheme, I now invite an objector, Mr. Payne, to read out his submission. May I remind everyone who's going to be speaking that you are allowed 2 minutes, and I am very strict. There will be a timer in the background. I'm afraid I don't think you'll be able to watch it at the same time, but I will give you a tiny bit of leeway, because the first way any of us know about it is when the bell goes at the end of the 2 minutes. So I'll probably let you finish a sentence. So, Mr. Payne, if you're ready, off you go.
Right, thank you, Maddie. I'd like to object to this planning application. I've lived in a village for over 33 years, and although the business park preceded my occupation, over that period there's been a substantial increase in numbers of vehicles travelling to and from the business park, and the size of the lorries now travelling on our country roads is unsustainable, as shown by the condition of our roads. I also object for the following reasons. There are currently, we believe, at least 16 vacant units at the business park. If these were let, then there would already be a significant increase in cars and lorries on the local roads, which are already struggling to cope with the amount of traffic to and from the business park. Another planning application for 8 units has been submitted. So with 24 additional units being utilised, our roads would already be overloaded. And to add a further 13 units, an office block and a cafe with potentially over 100 employees would, we believe, make our roads dangerous at certain times of the day, especially as much of our roads have no pavement. There is clearly not sufficient appetite for the business park, as seen from the vacant units currently there and the recent conversion of B1 units into 4 residential flats. Why build more? The travel plan submitted does not add up. Apart from the Tolson Major and Little Totham, pedestrians would not travel to the business park. The local roads are not conducive to cyclists, and there's little evidence that employees would travel to the business park by bicycle. As there is no public transport, this leaves cars, and there is little evidence for car sharing either. And considering the number of employee cars that are now parked outside the business park, instead of in their allocated parking areas within the business park, we have little faith in the travel plan being well policed by the business park management. Beckingham Street has very recently been resurfaced after many years of neglect, but there are already signs of damage from lorries and other vehicles within days of the work being finished.
I'm going to have to stop you there. Just in case anyone noticed that we are in fact on first name terms, I'd like to point out that Mr. Payne is chairman of the parish council, and therefore we've known each other for some number of years, but of late only through the parish council. So thank you, Mr. Payne, and I'll now ask Mrs. Meath, who represents the parish council, to make her submission. Mrs. Meath, please.
Hello, thank you, Chair. This site is for employment, but that does not mean any proposed development providing employment must be approved regardless of other policies. We believe this proposal is contrary to policies as follows. It is not sustainable. It would not contribute to the vitality or health of the community, nor would it protect or enhance the village or natural environment. No future measures could make it sustainable. S8, it would go outside of the settlement boundary. The officer report says this is acceptable for employment, but this local plan policy also says that planning permission will only be granted where the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside is not impacted upon. D1. The new buildings would be visible from the surrounding area, giving an overly industrialised aspect, which would be detrimental to the visual amenity and character of the countryside. They would generate additional noise, light pollution and disturbance, and would do nothing to enhance the distinctiveness of the local rural area. The 74 parking spaces do not meet the vehicle parking standard requirements for out-of-town non-residential development and would be insufficient. An application to the Parking Partnership for parking restrictions was recently refused, so there is no mitigation in place to prevent further overspill parking within the village. D1, there would be around 100 additional cars coming to and from the business park each day. The travel plan actions to minimise single-person car trips are not deliverable. Essex County Council have said the impact of additional traffic would not be severe and cannot recommend refusal. However, they do say the rural location of the site is such that for the majority of journeys, the only practical option would be to use the private car. This should be taken into consideration by the local planning authority when assessing the overall sustainability and acceptability of the site. Overall, this proposal is not sustainable, is too big and too damaging to the character and amenity of Tolleshunt Major and the local area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Well timed, if I may say so. Right, we have now submission 3, which is from Mr. Loon, who is the agent. So, Mr. Loon, we're ready when you are, please.
Hello, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Perfectly, thank you. I hope the others can.
Right. Okay, I'll begin. Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. You should have a letter from me dated the 14th of December, which sets out the key reasons why the scheme should be supported, and I ask you to refer to this. The application proposes a fully detailed commercial development upon brownfield land allocated within your adopted local plan for employment purposes under policy E1. The principle of the proposed use, which also responds to evidenced need, is therefore acceptable in your development plan terms. The scheme has followed a detailed pre-application exercise in late 2018 with officers and local members. Account has been taken of the advice given, and the application is accompanied by a suite of professional reports. The application has been properly considered against a whole range of technical issues, and it's pleasing to note there are no objections by any technical consultees. This should give you reassurance that the Council's local plan allocation can be delivered. A key concern from local objectors relates to traffic, in particular HGVs. However, the scheme comprises an office block and mostly small industrial units. The development does not propose any storage or distribution uses, nor would it be suited to large-scale manufacturing, and as such, HGV movements will be limited and traffic will mainly comprise cars and vans. A travel plan has been prepared with a view to encouraging car sharing, a 12% reduction, and other sustainable transport options. Essex highways do not raise objections on highway safety grounds, and there's no technical evidence to dispute this. The development will provide for many jobs and deliver significant economic benefits for the district, supporting your economic prosperity strategy, and your officers advise the proposal complies with local plan policies, and therefore in line with the NPPF's presumption in favour of sustainable development, the application should be approved without delay. Your support, Chairman and members, is therefore welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, members, the recommendation is that the planning application should be approved, subject to the applicant entering into the legal agreement pursuant to section 106, etc., etc., as you can read in your papers. Will anyone second that, please? We do need a seconder in order to debate it. It doesn't mean you're obliged to vote for it.
I'm okay to second that.
Okay, thank you. Right, members, I have, oh yes, sorry, I've had a reminder about the agenda item 10, which is 20/01021, land rear of Hill Barn, Rectory Lane, Wood and Mortimer, has been withdrawn. I'm very sorry about this. It was a technical thing. If anyone needs more information, I can ask Mr. Lee, but it isn't going to shed much light, I'm afraid, I don't think. So I'm terribly sorry. I'm very sorry for the people who've attended. Obviously, if you'd like to stay out of interest, please do. If not, then I understand. So once again, apologies. Are there any questions from members on that? No. Okay. Right. I have a list of speakers. Councillor Siddle, you're the ward member, or one of the ward members, and you called it in. Would you like to go? Would you like to start?
I'm not the ward member. I'm in the adjoining ward member, so it's under Tolleshunt.
You are the ward member.
You are the ward member, so.
Yeah,
so
but no, you did call it in, of course.
I did call it in. However, I would prefer the ward members to speak first, please.
Okay. Well, we have. I'm actually going to wait until a little later. So far I have Councillor Durham and Councillor Morley. So Councillor Morley as the other ward member, would you like to go first, or shall we let Councillor Durham go?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, Councillor Durham, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, in our lives as councillors, we get contacted by our residents on a wide number of occasions and a wide number of reasons. And Beckingham Business Park has been a substantial contributor to my inbox over the last few years. And indeed, I have spent, and I can safely say, several hours on the telephone to residents and other interested parties over the last 2 or 3 years. Now, I totally appreciate that this application concords with the local development plan, and it is a designated employment site. However, I think I've been provided over the years with such a wide variety of physical evidence, photographs, statements, etc., regarding parking on the roads adjacent, obstructions caused by vans and heavy goods vehicles, and employees choosing to park on the road outside the business park rather than in the designated places. And it is going to be for that very reason to support the residents that live around Beckingham Business Park and to have to put up with the antisocial parking and have to put up with the increased number of HGVs, which undoubtedly will be using a business park, and you can't rule out HGVs coming to deliver to one of the smaller units. That's how most stuff arrives these days. I very much doubt they would all be office space. Anyway, Chairman, I am going to move away from my normal stance of supporting everything in the local development plan, because I fear that there are significant aspects of this that need resolving to the local resident satisfaction before we allow any increase in the Beckingham Business Park. So it is for that reason, subject to anything I may hear in the next few minutes in the debate, that I am minded currently to not support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morley?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, it's exactly the same reasons as Councillor Durham was saying. My concerns, and I've had people contacting me, is really about the parking. It seems to be the main issue in the road. So I don't know how much extra parking there is going to be. Well, it's 70 cars, was it? I think, did they say extra
24,
capacity? But yeah, it does seem to be the main, well, one of them, I would say the main issue is parking on the pavement outside the residential properties there. So really could do with some more assurance, really, of sorting that out, I would have thought. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have several hands up, but I'm losing track of who's put their hand up in what order. I've definitely got Councillor Siddle next. But if you could use the chat, I would be very grateful, because then I've got you in the right order. But Councillor Siddle, you did, and I have you next. So your time, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The applicant has ensured that the development is commercially viable. However, they have not considered the state sustainability and suitability and the impact on the villages and the countryside. The development will not comply with Policy S8 and will have an impact on the character of the area and its development impacting onto greenbelt land. This policy also stipulates that the countryside will be protected for its landscape, as well as its intrinsic character and beauty. The development, due to its size and bulk, will have a negative impact on the beauty of the countryside in this part of Tolsham Major and the views from Little Totham. It will take 30 years before any trees planted will reduce this impact, as 5.9 stipulates, in terms of the document, there are no trees currently at the site. It is contrary to policies N2 and D1 due to the impact and scale of the design. This is especially relevant to blocks A, B and C. These buildings are imposing and will have a negative impact. The design of the buildings are incongruous and do not fit with the surroundings. the buildings will have a visible impact due to the nature of the spur design of the layout. Whoever decided in the first place that this was part of the settlement boundary really needs to look at things more carefully in the future. The policy states that any new development is visually attractive, responsive to local character. This development cannot demonstrate it meets this policy. The silver grey walls, as detailed on the site, are inappropriate for a site built into fields. 3.3, page 17, the officers agree with this. D2 stipulates that any development minimises all forms of possible pollution, including air. Due to the increased traffic through Little Totham and Tolson Major, this application does not provide measures that adequately address appropriate avoidance and mitigation. T1, there are no sustainable transport modes, with existing roads already unsafe and unsuitable. This will create a residual and a cumulative impact on Tolson Major and Little Totham. There is no public transport to the village. There is no pedestrian access possible with Tolson Major, Tolson Darty, or small villages. There are no pathways linking the villages, and it would be impossible to walk from the site from either Tiptree or Malden, the nearest larger settlements. It will generate a significant amount of impact, and the roads in the vicinity have not been upgraded. The site is already unsustainable and unsuitable for a business park, and this development will just exacerbate the situation. T1 also stipulates that any new development which is likely to generate significant journeys in terms of numbers and length should be sited in locations that are well served by public transport, as well as walking cycling routes. If we look at how an employee can get to the site, for example via train, from Calverton or Witham, they take a bus to Tolson Darcy and then walk, or they get a bus from Great Braxted and then walk 2.5 miles, or they get a bus to Heybridge and then walk 4 miles. All the roads, there are no pavements and few strip lights. 5.5.15 then stipulates that 16 bicycle spaces are those who want to risk their lives in that way. This is clearly impossible for this site. 3.3.4, the applicant states that they will encourage car sharing. This would possibly be feasible if it was one unit and one organisation that this site was being developed for. However, due to the number and site of the units, this is totally improbable. There is absolutely no way that this transport policy can be complied with and implemented. Over 1,400 vehicles already travel through the villages. 250 of those are commercial HGVs. The concern is not just HGVs, it's also the vans and cars. Already we have to have traffic calming police and the community rangers from Malden conducting speed checks. With 130 more employees at this site, 5.53 stipulates that there will be additional 24 trips. That means there will be 5 people per vehicle. 5.4.4 then stipulates that there are 75 parking spaces for up to 130 employees. As we know, the business park leads already to be cars being parked in Tolson Major. There are no pavements and it's already causing issues. The applicant is incorrect that the concern is just about HGVs. It is also about the cars that travel. The £5,000 travelling monitoring plan is derisory in terms of the impact. If the ownership, and there are several businesses, and this particular applicant has several businesses, if they were really concerned about the traffic, they would be investing in traffic calming measures for both Tolson Major and Little Totham. 3.3.4, highways have looked at the village, and of course, you're not going to see traffic problems and congestions in Tolson Major. Highways need to take into account the roads leading to the site. The route to the A12 via Great Braxted is already congested. There are numerous accidents at the junction of Great Braxted Park Road and Colchester Road. At peak times, at that junction and at Applefoot Bridge, there is traffic stretching 400 metres already. This is unsuitable and unsustainable development, and it cannot be approved. Members need to take into account the views of the residents of the 3 villages most drastically affected and refuse this application. The growth of this site is not sustainable, is not well designed, and is contrary to policies S1, T1, D2 and N2. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, I have Councillor White and Councillor Jarvis. I'm not sure exactly of the order, so can we go with Councillor Councillor White first, please. Councillor Darren, by the way, I have a hand. Is that a legacy hand, or are you asking to speak again? Okay, whatever. Councillor White, please. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have to say that I think we're between a rock and a hard place on this one. It's in the LDP as a site for development for business. The problems with the lorries and the roads have been there certainly since I've been elected. But because it's in the plan to have development there, I don't think we can refuse this. I just think, you know, we're going to nowhere. The only thing I might suggest is that it could be deferred until we get a detailed report done on the parking, because I am concerned, that's my only concern, is that there is not enough parking to support the units, because that's paramount, because you'll not only get the people working in the units, but you will get the visitors. Other than that, I approve of the development. I think the design works. It's no more of an eyesore than the new Sainsbury's at Woodham Ferrers, and that we've all got used to fairly quickly. The only other thing I have a slight problem is, and it's not a bit woolly on the case law, is under 3.3.5, the Little Totham Water Recycling Centre. It's saying that it's at capacity, but due to recent case law and long established legal arguments, this cannot be used for a refusal. But what I would say is there any way we can tie it up that work cannot be started until the recycling centre is upgraded? Because this could very well take many, many, many years before this application's even started. So I don't know if the officers can assist on those 2 points.
That sounds like one for Mr. Lee to me. Mr. Lee, are you able to help us with that?
Chairman, do you want to come back at all of them at the end? All the points?
That would be fine. That would be fine. Councillor Jarvis, then, please.
Thank you, Chairman. My comments are similar to Councillor Siddle's, but not as detailed and as well researched, I fear. I have read, obviously, the brief, and I have listened to what parish commentary has been. I think clearly, from an employment point of view, it is a designated site, etc. But it's all a question of balance, as we know, each application on its own merits. And it's quite clear that it seems to me that the harm to the countryside is significant, and it's quite clear that the harm regarding traffic, whether that is increase in HGV or whether that's just cars and the number of transports, because of course people go to sites and then they go home, they might go somewhere else for lunch, that sort of thing. I know there's some catering on site, but it's not just always a trip in and a trip home. So I think harm to the countryside, the traffic issues, I've lived in Little Totham myself, so I mean I'm familiar with the site, familiar with the issues, and so without going on further, because other councillors have made the points more eloquently than I'm doing in this case, I would not be in favour of the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do I have any other speakers waiting in the wings?
Chairman, Councillor Mrs Fleming's waiting to speak.
Ah, right, sorry. Councillor Mrs Fleming, please.
Thank you, Chair. A question for the officers. Mr Payne in his submission referred to B1 units on the site being converted into 4 residential flats. I just was hoping to get some more information about that from the officers. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sure we can do that. I remember that it was one of the permitted development conversions. Right, it's actually my turn, I think, finally. So I will have a question for that shortly, Mr. Lee. Nearly everything I was going to say has been said. I'm speaking now as ward member, not as chairman. I do have concerns for all the local residents, particularly the ones opposite, obviously, because you look at that row of cars and you think, well, that's not so bad. Well, that's all right if you're just driving past it, but if you're trying to get an HGV vehicle in or out of the entrance to the business park in that direction, or indeed trying to get a fairly large, or even a family-sized car out of one of the residences opposite, it becomes a problem and you end up driving on pavements. There is no way, as Ms Councillor White says, there is no way of getting around the fact that it's in the LDP as an employment land, but I think there's so much wrong with this particular application that I am really struggling to support it. So could I ask you, Mr. Lee, to come back with answers to some of these many questions? Hello?
Thank you, Chairman.
Mr.
Yes,
Lee.
I was
Excellent.
just
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
trying to look up something in relation to Councillor White's point. I think Councillor White summed it up pretty well, to be honest. And but I will obviously deal with it because it's been raised by a number of members. As everyone present knows, a planning application needs to be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And that always needs to be our first consideration when us as decision makers, whether it's officers doing delegated or the committee members or even the plan inspector, look to make a decision on an application. As I've said before at committee, one of the things I like about planning is it's 50% subjective and 50% playing by the rules, planning strong parameters, and that is really the starting point, is that 50% of not being subjective. We have policies, and that is what we need to consider against our consider applications against. They're adopted policies by the council. They're not the planning authority's policies. They're not officers' policies. They're not the old councillors that were here, when the document went through 8 years ago. They are the council's policies, and they are the starting point for any determination of any application that we have in front of us. And as Councillor Jarvis said, each application must be based on its own merit, and that is correct, but they still need to be assessed against the adopted policies that are relevant to the application. So you need to consider if there are any conflicting issues with the policies that are different, rather than just saying you don't agree with the policies. As has been explained and discussed by members and within the officer's report, the application is an allocated site. It has been looked at as part of the LDP process, considered that expanding the Beckham Business Park is a correct and appropriate way to deliver the employment need for the district over the life of the plan, which is until 2029. I know members may have concerns in relation to various things, and I highlight that. No members raised a lot of the issues that raised related to maybe existing problems, decorum of potential users of the site and existing site. The planning system isn't here to solve existing problems. You need to be able to deal with issues that are raised solely from this application. And while I can understand frustrations with the public may have in relation to people not parking where they should be parking and matters such as that, that isn't really something for consideration as part of this application. The existing site as is what it is, but the council has considered it appropriate to expand the site and deliver employment land on that site. And as part of that process of adopting the LDP, issues such as highways would have been looked into and would have been considered. And so the general highways issues would have been looked at when this site was adopted. So raising general concerns, I would say, would be a very big concern I would have towards looking for a reason for refusal, because firstly, strategically it's been looked at and found to be acceptable in highways terms, but more importantly and specifically to this application, there has been a transport assessment submitted which has been obviously looked at by the Essex County Council Highways, and that hasn't been objected to or conflicted with by them. So I would have concerns in relation to that matter, and that also in relation to the allocation. I think some of the concerns in relation to design and loss of countryside seem to be going almost to the principle of redeveloping this site, and I would guide members away from a reason for refusal based on that, because this is an allocated site. The development of this site has been accepted in principle, and there will be general impacts on the character of the area from such a development. Similar conversation we have about when there's been reserved matters and outline. It's not saying that design can't be looked at this stage, but the principle of losing this field is not something we can look at as an issue, because it is an adopted site. For clarity, the council doesn't have Greenbelt. We're not a green metropolitan Greenbelt district, so members can shy away from using that phrase because it's not correct for Malden District Council, and it is within the settlement boundary. So that's the sort of consideration we have. Whether you agree with it or not, it is the adopted policy. It is what the council's agreed. So that would be a consideration for any inspector. In relation to car parking, I think the officer's report deals with it, and I was looking at it, but I've moved away. So I think off the cuff, I think our policy, our adopted SPD requires 74 car parking spaces. I think it says in the report, and the proposed development provides 75. So actually, in relation to washing its own face for car parking provision on this site, in our adopted policy, it would meet that. I haven't heard any evidence specifically why there would be a reason to consider it needed larger or greater level of car parking. I understand the concerns about the sustainability of the site, but as I said before, as an allocated site, we would have considered that at that time. In relation to Councillor White's point, as members are aware, reason for refusal based on sewage, etc., foul water, etc., is not something we can robustly defend at appeal. Case law explains that it's a matter that should be looked at through conditions, and case law is very clear that if a condition can be imposed, an application shouldn't be refused, and it should be dealt with through a condition. And my understanding, there is a condition imposed on the or recommended, not imposed, recommended. I think it's condition 25. And I think if members look at the update, the applicant has challenged the necessity for that condition because of, arguably because they consider that the site's allocated, so it shouldn't be a matter for the decision makers. Officers saying that they don't agree with that, and they are recommending that condition is retained and imposed. The only other point I think Councillor Fleming's in relation to prior approval. Yes, I can confirm a prior approval has been granted. That, though, is not a planning application. It's not looked at through our policies. The government have facilitated the allowance of the loss of some employment. Barns, we probably have them a little bit more used to them in the district rather than the employment land. I think it was about 2015 this was looked at. So it was a little while ago. Unfortunately, they aren't planning applications. We don't have the same controls over them. They are more of a tick box exercise, but that really wouldn't be a consideration for determination of this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, I have Councillor Durham would like to come back, so fairly briefly, please.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and I hear what Mr. Lee has said, and I've listened to what the other members say, and members will note that I'm usually vocally in favour of supporting the LDP, and Mr. Lee has said that we're obliged to do that, and I accept unless there are material considerations. I believe that the misery that the people living adjacent to the entrance of the site, they have had several years of misery due to antisocial parking by staff on the site who are not following the rules in respect of parking in allocated bays and other service lorries. I've had photographs sent to me of an obstruction of an ambulance, and I think that I would be unhappy about agreeing an application to extend this site in the absence of some mitigation measures to make the immediate neighbours' lives more tolerable. Members will also know there is actually a pending local highways panel case which is on hold subject to tonight's decision, and it would certainly be something, should this be granted tonight, that we can take back to South Essex Parking Partnership. But Chairman, I'm going to maintain strongly that the inconvenience put to the locals and the people living in the vicinity is a material consideration justifying refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. We will need to be careful, as Mr. Lee pointed out, that existing problems are not something we can expect planning applications to solve. So you need to think about how we're going to word that, Councillor. So, Councillor Keys, please, you wish to speak.
Right, everybody else has had a say, so I'll have a say. Well, I think Councillor Siddle had a very good speech, and I think if anybody can come up with any reasons I think Mr. Siddle was able to come up with a few of them. If we can help him with them, or if he can start it off, I would be much appreciated. I know you and Councillor Morley are ward members, but Mr. Siddle did have a good chat. I think we can all agree with that. He's good speech, not a chat. So if that's
put
okay.
a lot of research into that. And
Yeah,
I
he
was
has
gonna
put a
go-
hell of a lot of research. He's had an awful lot of time that has taken him to do that. It's a credit to him for what he's come up with. But yeah, if that's okay with you, Mr. Siddle.
Well, hang on a minute.
We need to have a vote first, don't we?
We
Before
do need to have a vote on the recommendation. I don't think I have to be Mystic Meg to work out how it works, but we do have to do it. The recommendation to refuse is on the table.
I'll second it.
And it was seconded. Yes, it was. I think that was Councillor Miss White. So, those in favour, please. Tara, could you please take the roll call?
Yes, Chairman. Can I just clarify? This is the officer's recommendation that we're voting.
We are voting. Yes, I put that on the table. That's what we're debating. It's the officer's recommendation to refuse. So, depending on what happens with that, we'll
sorry,
go
to
on.
approve.
To approve.
Approve, yeah.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Officer's
approve.
recommendation
I'm sorry,
to
yes.
approve.
Officers are recommending approval. I'm getting my head in a twist.
Thank you, members. So, this is, as we said, the officer's recommendation for approval. If you could just advise if you're for, against, or abstaining when I call your name, please. Starting with Councillor Durham.
I'm against.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs. Fleming.
Against. Tara.
Councillor Jarvis. Councillor Jarvis.
Tara.
That's right.
I'm against. Thank you, Tara.
Very much. Thank you. Councillor Keys.
I'm against.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
Against.
Thank you. And Councillor Miss White.
Well, we should be voting for because it's against the LDP, but there's actually no point, so I might as well vote against like everybody else has. But we're going to lose at appeal.
Thank you very much. So, Chairman, the results of that are nobody's for, 8 against, and nobody abstaining. Thank you very much.
So now, members, we need an alternative proposal. This time I'll get it right. I will take a presumption that this is going to be a proposal to refuse, but we need the reasons for refusal before we put that to the vote. So can I ask you, Councillor Siddle, because you've put a lot of work into this?
I can, Chairman. Thank you. So I would suggest that we recommend refusal on policy 8, as it has an impact on the character and area and impacting on the landscape and its intrinsic character and beauty due to its size and bulk. Also, in terms of N2 and D1, due to the impact and scale and density of the design of the development. And the density is a crucial thing, and that is what part of the problem. I would also suggest this is a new development. So that's the crucial thing in terms of T1, is the other buildings were all built or all there before the LDP. This is a new development after the LDP has been developed or implemented. And T1 of our LDP stipulates that there has to be sustainable transport modes, and that that any new development which is likely to generate significant journeys in terms of numbers and length should be sited in a location that is served by public transport. This site is not served by public transport.
Okay.
So if the developer wants to bring a bus service in that serves Little Totham and Tolsham Maze, that would be extremely welcome to reduce the number of traffic. But there is no public transport, and this is a new development.
Okay, let me go to Mr. Lee to get some professional advice on the best way to put this, please. Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the first point put forward by Councillor Siddle is really a bit of a two-parter. Talking about the impact on the intrinsic character and beauty of the area, and is a concern. The site is allocated for development, and that concern and that issue raised by Councillor Siddle seems to really go just to the principle of developing the site for employment.
Now, hang on, one at a time, please.
Sorry, I was just going to ask.
There's a second part of that which then seemed to be more specific to the point about the actual appearance of the quantum, for want of a better phrase, of the redevelopment of the site. And that also would go to some of the points that Councillor Siddle raised when he was speaking earlier about the design, which, if members consider that the actual appearance of the structures and the quantum of development is unattractive and unacceptable, and there's harm in that way, that is different to maybe some of the points that were maybe talking about intrinsic character beauty, because that's about protecting the countryside, and we've got to accept that this site through the LDP can be built on. So trying to protect it as a field would be a very flawed approach, especially when an inspector was to look at it. But obviously, if it moves on to the subjectivity points, that is something that as decision makers would have potentially some legitimacy and a reason for refusal. I'm not saying it'd be successful, but would at least have some legitimacy and a reason for refusal. In relation to the need for the location to be served by public transport, the big issue I would have to highlight is this is an allocated site. We've accepted that this site can be built on for employment uses as part of the LDP, and any concerns in relation to the sustainability of the site would be a concern. The comment in relation to provision of maybe a bus route or something like that is that any Section 106 contributions need to be proportionate to development, and a scheme of this size would not be expected to deliver something like that, and never would have been through the allocation of the LDP for that reason. And obviously it doesn't form any of the IDP or other requirements through the LDP for that reason. So I would have quite a lot of concerns in relation to that second concern that was raised by Councillor Siddle. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle, I'm going to let you come back, but we do have to bear in mind not to chuck the kitchen sink at it. I know. Because you can actually lose costs on an appeal that you win simply because they don't like all your reasons. So I'm sure you appreciate that.
The big difference between this particular site is the fact that because of the spur element, so the rest of the business park does not stick out into the countryside like this is going to. So therefore, it will have an impact on the countryside for both Tolsham Major and Little Totham. It's not screened, and it will take a long time for it to be screened. The buildings are going to be silvery blue, which on a green field you're going to see for a very long way. And it is extremely dense in terms of the way that it's been designed. There's an awful lot of units, and and there seems to be too many units and not enough parking space. I know the officers are saying that it's within the limit. Well, that we know that all industrial estates never have enough parking spaces. Every single one I go to has problems with car parking, and we are exacerbating the situation for Tolsham Major with this new development. So I think in terms of scale and density and its impact, I think they're all extremely valid. I still would like T1 in there on transport because it's not a sustainable location. This place has evolved. It's not something that originally it was a canning factory, and it's evolved into this monstrosity now in terms of its development, in terms of the businesses, in terms of the impact. It should never become what it's become. But that's another matter.
That's another matter. That is another story. Right. While you carry on thinking for a minute, I've got Councillor White, and then I think we need a proposal. So if you can narrow that down a bit, that would be Councillor White.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean, I just wanted to raise whether we could do something with the parking, and it was just literally on the design aspect because of the parking. I mean, I don't think we can do it on T1 because it is an allocated site. But I do wonder if I don't think it's going to be successful, but we could try on design and maybe link parking into that design. But that's the only reason I think we can use.
That sounds very sensible to me. Mr. Lee, any thoughts?
Thank you, Chairman. As members will be aware, and I'm sure Councillor White's been at committees where we've discussed these matters, obviously the level of car parking and hard standing obviously can form a reason for refusal that fits in with design. The only issue I'd raise with this application is that the quantum of development, the level of car parking required to a certain extent is what it is. I personally don't think the provision is particularly poor in aesthetic terms in relation to what the proposed use is. So I wouldn't want to use that as a sole reason for refusal. If members considered the excessive car parking, lack of landscaping, etc., fed into a rather general design, that would be acceptable. My professional advice would be, but I don't think you could have a reason in relation to design of car parking, and I don't think, Councillor White's suggestion would really go to deal with the point that Councillor Siddle was trying to raise either, which is, which he expanded on further by saying it's in relation to a level of car parking provision on site. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Siddle, I'm sure you're ready or very nearly ready with the proposal.
I'm trying my best.
Can we just, would you consider, trying to limit your proposal to the more subjective elements, and then possibly with a final agreement delegated to me as chairman and ward member, Councillor Morley as chairman and ward member, Mr. Lee and yourself as the proposer?
Okay, so
on whatever you're about to tell me.
Okay, so I would go back to that. This development does not comply with policy S8 and will have an impact on the character of the area. It is contrary to policies N2 and D1 due to the impact and scale of the design, and it will not fit within its surroundings. Yeah, and the density of the scale and density of the design.
Density, okay. Nobody can argue with scale and density.
Yeah.
It's an opinion. Yeah, it's an opinion. It's an opinion.
It is.
And I'd have the same opinion as others, but it's an opinion.
Yeah, the fact that they're proposing that there's going to be 130 employees and there's 75 parking spaces is immediately it's too dense.
I hear what you're saying, but it fits the standards. So I think, as you outlined, it sounds certainly like a sensible proposal. If that's your proposal, based on those reasons to
refuse,
that's the reason. Those are the reasons for refusal. Will you also add any particular conditions into a delegated matter to be agreed?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, because we're going to get a terrible muddle if we try and do that now. We might easily miss something out.
Yeah.
So we have Councillor Siddle's proposal, as I hope you've been able to follow all right, members. Do I have a seconder? Happy to second
that, Councillor Chairman.
Right, that was seconded by, well, all sorts of people, but loudest and first on Durham. So, Tara, could you please take the vote, and I will get it right this time, on Councillor Siddle's proposal to refuse based on the policies he's mentioned and the actual wording to be worked out in, there's a word, I'm looking for it and I've lost it.
To be delegated to officers, Chairman.
Delegated to officers in consultation
with yourself and the ward members.
Consultation with the ward members, the chairman, which is actually only two of us, and actually with Councillor Siddle, because it's his proposal. Right, members.
Thank you, Chairman. So, members, if you could just indicate for, against or abstaining. This is again, as the Chairman just said, voting for refusal of this application. Starting with Councillor Durham, please.
I'm for the proposal, Tara.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Fleming.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
For, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
For, Tara.
Councillor Morley.
For, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Miss White.
Abstain.
Chairman, the results of that are 7 for, nobody against and 1 abstention. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, members. Right, we are going to have to move things along a bit now. I've been very generous with letting everyone speak on that because it is so very important to a small village. But we will move on now to item 6 on the agenda, which is our second planning application, Barns at Lower Farm, Blind Lane, Tolson Knights. So this is, there is a member's update in relation to this, and this is from Ms. Parker Haynes to present, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Planning permission is sought to convert the existing agricultural barns to a dwelling. It should be noted that there is an extant permission to allow for the conversion under a recent prior approval application 20-00398. The main alterations under this application from the prior approval are the demolition and rebuild of Barn A, change in external materials and slight alterations to the design of the dwelling and openings. This is the location plan. This is the block plan. The proposal does involve all 4 barns, so A, B, C, and D, for ease of reference. These are the existing elevations of barns A, B, and C. These are the proposed elevations of barns A, B, and C. The existing and proposed elevations of barn D. Existing floor plan. The proposed floor plan, barn A is the only aspect with the first floor. And these are comparisons of the prior approval elevations and the proposed elevations, the subject of this application. And barn D. These are some photographs of the site as existing. The proposed development has been assessed against all material planning considerations, including the previous permission. Whilst the site is located outside of the settlement boundary, the previous permission in this instance provides a full back position for the provision of a dwelling on this site, and therefore it is considered that the provision of one dwelling in this location is acceptable. This application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Parker Haynes. In fact, there's no one to speak on this, so I'm going to put the recommendation that the application be approved, subject to the conditions as detailed in the report. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second it. Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Keys. That's seconded by Councillor Keys.
Councillor Keys, seconded it.
Okay, Councillor Morley and I are the ward members. I am also a member of the parish council who were not entirely happy about the design, shall we say, as a body. However, bearing in mind the fallback position, unless I hear anything to the contrary from other members before we get to a vote, I'm really minded to support it. Anybody else wish to speak? Oh, I have Councillor Fleming has had to leave the meeting, just in case anyone needs to be aware of that. So, right, members, there's no requirement to speak, but if you want to, please pop up a hand. Councillor Morley? No? Councillor Jarvis?
Agree, officer recommendation.
Okay. Do we need to take a vote? Does anyone feel strongly against this? Councillor Jarvis?
Yeah, no, Chairman, sorry, I was just going to talk on it, just for the benefit of having some debate. Looked to me like a good design, and I was in favour of the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Don't worry, there's plenty of time later on to talk about lots of things. Councillor Morley, are you trying to speak, or is it just you're flickering?
No, that's fine. I was.
Okie dokie. Right, let's put this to a quick vote then, please, Tara, if we can.
Yes,
I would rather do it that way. So we are voting on the officer's recommendation to approve as laid out in the officer's report. Thank you.
Members, if you could just indicate for, against or abstain, please. Starting with Councillor Durham, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Fleming. Oh, sorry, she's left me too. Apologies. Councillor Jarvis.
For, thank you, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
4, Tara.
Thank you, Councillor Morley.
4, please.
Siddle.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Thompson.
4.
White.
4.
Thank you, Chairman. That's 7-4. Nobody against and no abstentions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that has been approved in line with the officer's report and recommendation. Right, now we have agenda item 7, which is Bowen's Buyer, Church Street, Tollsbury. Right, let's have the presentation, please. That's Ms Bowles, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Planning permission is sought for the conversion, renovation and extension to a historic barn to create a 2-bedroom dwelling. Here is the location plan. You can see the subject barn here. We have the proposed block plan. You can see the access to the site will be taken through the farmyard and through an existing access point. We have the existing and the proposed southern elevation. The form of the existing barn will be largely retained, with 2 modest single-storey extensions proposed on the north and the west elevation, one of which you can see here. This is the western extension. We have the existing and proposed northern elevation. Again, the form is largely retained, and the northern elevation, the northern extension, sorry, is here. We have the existing and proposed east and west elevations. The existing and proposed ground floor plans. Again, the proposed extensions are here on the western elevation and here on the northern elevation. The existing and proposed first floor plans and the proposed mezzanine level. We also have existing and proposed section drawings. We have some site photos which shows the current condition of the listed building, and the top pictures here show the barn and the neighbouring dwelling to the south, and then this is a view facing west from the site. The proposed development would secure the sympathetic restoration and future of a vulnerable heritage asset which has been on the at-risk register for 16 years. This is a material consideration of considerable weight. The council is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and taking this into account, the location of the site for residential development is considered to be acceptable. The provision of a 2-bedroom dwelling would also contribute to the council's housing stock. The resulting dwelling is not considered to adversely impact the neighbouring occupiers of the site or highway safety, and parking provision and the parking provision and amenity area would be provided in accordance with the recommended standards. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, we do have a submission from an objector who's unfortunately not able to make it. And I have used my discretion to, although it's not strictly speaking technical issues, I am going to ask Mr. Lee to read it out, if you would,
Ms.
Mr.
Parker
Lee.
Haynes has volunteered
Oh,
to
it's
read
Ms.
it.
Parker Haynes. Okay, lucky Ms. Parker Haynes. Yeah, if you could just start, I would start at the second paragraph, because the first bit was more about department and communication and a few other things, and not actually the material planning matters. Does that make sense to you, Ms. Parker Haynes?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, well, when you're ready, please, everybody note this is not the officer's view. She is reading it on behalf of an objector who couldn't make it. Thank you.
Bowhunts Hall is a Grade 2 listed house, which in the past has been the principal dwelling in this farmstead, but is now our home. The buyer was split from the hall when sold by the applicant. If granted permission, the buyer will overlook our home, our garden, our principal entrance door and our every movement as we are coming and going, causing a significant loss of privacy, and our neighbours in the Debo Huns Manor Farmstead would also suffer increased traffic movements and some overlooking. It is our opinion that this application is yet another cynical attempt to exploit this building for the maximum commercial return as possible, a strategy that has been going on for too long. Numerous applications have been rejected before, and even Her Majesty Planning Inspectorate has previously rejected an application. This application for a 2-bedroom barn is yet again another piece in this jigsaw and would clearly become a 4-bedroom home as the footprint and the design allows. Knowing the district's need 2-bedroom homes, they have used this as a hook. This shows the cynicism of the application when clearly the Malden needs 2-bed starter homes or 2-bed bungalows, not large 2-bed barn conversions with gyms. If it was the heritage of the structure that they cared for, this building would not have been left to rot. Being on the buildings at risk register should bring consequences for owners, allowing the neglect to continue. As the Tollesbury Parish Council concluded in their rejection of the application is full of holes with missing documents, incorrect plans, the bare minimum in the way of supporting evidence, and no consideration for the adjacent homes or the wildlife in the area, including bats and birds of prey. There are 2 magnificent horse chestnuts on our boundary that are protected by their location in the curtilage of this listed building, but they could be lost during the renovation due to root damage, which would expose Bow Huns Hall still further. The report to the Director of Service Delivery is written in such a way to lead the committee to the conclusion that approval is the only outcome. The whole tone of the report is heading only one way, towards a presumption for approval, when surely the committee needs an unbiased review of the application. There are no pros and cons of the application, only the positives and the concerns of the neighbouring homes, and the opinion of the parish council seemed to have been ignored.
Thank you. Well done. It was quite a long one. We can't know which bits Mr. Byte would have edited, but unfortunately he's had to leave that to us. There is, in fact, no ward member because Councillor Bamford has resigned. Councillor Morley and I are the next best thing. Councillor Morley has asked to speak first, so where you go, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my concern with this really is, quite honestly, building through a farmyard like that with machinery, health and safety and various things like that, and I think it will impact. Privacy would be completely taken away there, but my concern really is...
Evan, I'm sorry, we have the agent to speak. I'm so sorry, Councillor Morley.
All right. You got the gist of it anyway.
We don't have the submissions, Bird. What happened?
Chairman, she this is the agent, Miss Brown. She did apologies. She did apply to speak. We do normally ask that they provide us a copy of their statement, which we haven't got, but she is on the call and wanting to speak, Chairman.
Right, I can see her, and I'm sorry I missed that, Miss Brown. I apologise. Yes, you have 2 minutes from when you're ready. Away you go.
Thank you. Bohan's Byre has stood for nearly 200 years. The building has been on Malden's risk register since 2004, having now been empty for over 20 years. The fabric has deteriorated over time. Almost 10 years ago, planning was refused for its conversion, and the building is in a further state of disrepair. Over the last 2 years, we have been working on a scheme for the Byre, working in detail with Barry Hillman Crouch to produce a proposal that preserves the historic frame and respects the agricultural aesthetic of the original building. The proposal uses traditional, sustainable materials and allows the historic frame to remain exposed and protected internally. The new building envelope will encase and protect the historic fabric with an insulated, breathable jacket. The scheme under consideration this evening has been supported by the planning officer, conservation officer, highways and ecologists, presenting a sympathetic, financially viable proposal which will allow this building to stand and be used for another 200 years. The level of investment required to save a building such as this makes residential conversion the most viable use. The objections to the conversion of the building are historic and local and are concerned with the loss of an agricultural use, of which there is a vast oversupply in the district. If approved, the buyer will become a two-bedroom home that is flanked by existing dwellings to its east and west, sitting comfortably within a residential and agricultural setting. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I do apologise for that. Back to you, Councillor Morley, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's still, though, access through a farm, which, being a farmer myself, it's not really an ideal situation, to be honest with you. And I just think really health and safety and vehicles running through a farmyard, I'm just not really sure about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, I'll have you next.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've listened with interest there to what the agent was saying, and obviously Councillor Morley. Of course, it would be a great idea to renovate the barn. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. It does look in a bad state. And of course, there is a requirement at the moment to increase housing stock. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to convert this barn to a house. I mean, if you could get up again, if the officer could get up again the map so we could see where the house is, I'd just like to have another look at that. Is that okay, Chairman?
Yes, please, if you could do that. Whoever's in charge of sharing the screen.
I think the point which I'm hoping to just highlight is the point Councillor Morley is referring to is I think the agent just mentioned, and I need to be careful because I know the agent hasn't got the right to reply, but the agent sort of pointed out that it's going to be, sort of either side of two other sort of properties sitting neatly. But this is a farm. This is a farm with farmyard buildings all around it. And essentially this development here, which I think, is put up as two-bedroom, but it's a very large plot. It looks to me for two-bedroom. But this will be a property that's essentially sitting in a farmyard. It just doesn't seem to me, a very good idea. Now I'm also trying to look at that from a sort of planning point of view, of course. In principle, from a common sense point of view, it doesn't seem a good idea in terms of where it is. But I'm thinking to myself, well, at the moment, there's a historic barn, and although it's clearly in a poor state, and it certainly does need to be repaired, nobody's disputing that. More properties there, I would feel, would be, a harm to the countryside. And I think in terms of planning law, that's what I'd associate it with. So it doesn't look to me as if it's in the right place. It does. I think there will be lots of problems in terms of travelling through the farmyard, although I noted the fact that there is historical access permission to do that. But it doesn't look to me like a very sensible use of the barn. What a pity it can't be renovated in some way as a historic barn, which is its original purpose. So no, I'm generally not really at the moment in favour, but I'm very happy to listen to other councillors, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Siddle next. I'm saving my piece to the end, I think. Councillor Siddle, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, could we have the map back up again? Sorry about that. I'll start talking. I have been to the site.
I missed out Councillor Keys. Councillor Siddle, I'll get to you, Councillor Keys. I will.
Okay, so I have been to that site. I was there at that site sort of during 2019 for various reasons. And in terms of being a farmyard, it's not really a farmyard. And the two buildings that are on the left-hand side, sort of of the diagram, right where your mouse is. Thank you, very excellent work. Those are also houses. And in terms of, there's further houses on the other side of the barn. There's a house to the left-hand side, which you can just see the name of it. So there is quite a lot of residential dwellings there already, and it's not exactly a farm from what I remember and from going there in the true sense of the word. And I think this particular development will enhance that location. So I'm in favour. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keys. Sorry about that. I got you out of order.
Right. Good evening. I've got a few questions here. I'm going to come at these with wearing two hats. It was refused on appeal. What is the difference between this and the appeal? I'd like to know. Now, I haven't been there for a few years, but I have been through there in another job where I run the haulage to collect stuff, not from the farm, but that was a working farm. Now, there was animals in the sheds to the left as you went through. I know that. And then with animals, I know this is away from the people that are putting the application. Now, animals make noises and the smells. And if I recall, the yard naturally slopes towards this barn that is up for conversion. The land drops away towards that. Also, if it's a crop assured farmyard, and I know this is the only farmyard, and I would imagine they're crop assured, which I think everybody nowadays has to be crop assured to sell their goods to the industries that use them for food production, there would be a chemical store. Now, whether that can be bought up, I don't know where that is situated, and I don't know what it is or how it is or anything about it, but there would have to be a chemical store there for a farm assured. And I think Councillor Siddle or Councillor Morley, agricultural machinery is huge nowadays, and children and people walking about where agricultural machinery is moving about is a no-go. And I was through there probably 15 sort of years ago. Now, these conker trees, stroke horse chestnut trees, which I believe they were very, very big. Well, very, very big. Yeah, they were very big then. Now, will they be disrupted in the alterations of this building? I know it was mentioned earlier by one of the other members. And also, what about contamination? Because obviously it's been a farmyard for forever, I would imagine. So there's just a few things that I would like to see, and also some pictures of the overview when the barn is done. Is there any pictures of overlooking the other properties there and the distances? I can't seem to see that on there, but that's sort of the gist of what I'm trying to get at. Please.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, or whichever officer is going to answer that, please.
Through you, Chairman, I will come back on a number of the points, but it might be worth if Ms. Bowles takes members through the impact on the neighbours using the plans first.
Okay, yes, let's start there. Thanks.
Sorry, I'll just share the plans.
Thank you.
So the closest neighbouring property to the application site is Bowens Hall here. At its closest point, which is corner to corner, it's 25 metres. As it sets out in my report, the back-to-back distance contained within the Morden District Design Guide in relation to overlooking is 25 metres, and that's directly back-to-back, so window to window. Obviously, the orientation of these dwellings in relation to each other mitigate any overlooking even further than if it was directly back-to-back. Whilst there may be some views into the front part of the application site, this area wouldn't be classed as private amenity space. Therefore, it has been concluded that there's no impact in terms of overlooking. The access in relation to the farmyard and the vehicular movements, obviously, if this was an agricultural barn, there'd be additional agricultural vehicle movements. So as a residential dwelling, it's not considered to work that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lee, bearing in mind, would you like me to speak first, actually, Mr. Lee?
Yep, more than happy for that.
Thank you. I've actually got a lot of problems with this, and some of it's to do with lack of information like the arboreal report on the trees that we don't know anything about. And one or two things haven't been mentioned, and I'm afraid some of it you'll have to take my word for it, but I do think it indicates that we don't have enough information. So this farm is under Natural England's high-level stewardship, which means it provides grassland which has to be managed by grazing animals, but is there sort of for the benefit of the brent geese specifically and lots of other wildlife in general. Which means, yes, Councillor Keyes was right, that there are animals and they do make noises and they do smell, and what goes in must, I'm afraid, come out. And in actual fact, the farmer is looking to increase, because he's increasing the grazing for the work with Natural England, he's looking to increase his livestock, and did in fact say to me that he has been asking to use that barn. He would like to take the barn on as an agricultural barn. Again, you can only take this as hearsay, but I am concerned. I wish there'd been some attempt to market the barn. Yes, there may be a surfeit of barns in Malden District, but if you have cows in Church Road in Tollbury, it's no good having spare barns in Tolton Darcy. You need the barn where you are. I'm also very concerned that this is no two-bedroom dwelling. This is not a nice, affordable home in the sense that someone who is looking for a two-bedroom home can in fact afford to buy it, because that's not what we're looking at here. You wouldn't need all those extensions for that. The barn, just the barn itself, is more than sufficient for a two-bedroom home. So yes, Mr. Lee, can you come back and help me with any of that and the other members' questions?
Thank you, Chairman. Always happy to help best I can. In relation to Councillor Keyes's point about the previous approval.
Councillor Swain, it's lovely to see you in attendance, but would you mind turning your video off, please, and your microphone? Thank you very much. Thank you. Good to see you as always. Sorry, Mr. Lee, please.
Sorry, it's thrown me, but I'm very easily confused. You members know that. Officer's report deals with the matter of the previous appeal. The council looked to refuse it at the time for two reasons for refusal. And when the inspector dismissed the appeal, which he did do, the major issue related to the impact on the listed building in relation to the loss of special historic character and architectural importance. That development was significantly different in design and appearance and scale to what the one is before us. So that is obviously materially different. So that previous reason for refusal to some extent falls away, because it is a very significantly different proposal to what we have in front of us tonight. Impact on neighbours obviously has been dealt with by Ms. Bowles already. The point raised in relation to, if you want a better word, smells, existing agricultural use, etc., is a bit of an interesting point. Obviously, the use of an adjoining site is a consideration in determination of the application. I think as Officer Paul, he's quite light touch on this to a certain extent, but that's primarily in relation to the relatively light touch approach by the planning agent. I think on an assessment that officers consider, local planning authority considers taking into account the existing residential properties in close proximity, there is unlikely to be a significant harm, but there is limited information to support that assessment. So if members had grave concerns about that, and obviously the potential for the impact on the existing business, that would be something that they may wish to consider. But as I said, it is quite a light approach in the current application, but officers take into account the existing properties. It's quite a balanced decision. In relation to Councillor Jarvis's point about new dwelling, yes, we do need new dwellings, but as members know, it's not a case of just accepting any dwelling. So I don't disagree with his point in relation to that. And, you'll probably be hearing me say things along those lines many times over the coming months in committees, especially with the lack of 5-year land supply. But that is obviously, I think this is the first Northwest we've had since not having a 5-year lands plan. Obviously, that is does slightly change the balancing process, but it doesn't mean we automatically have to accept any new dwelling. The point about marketing and sort of similar points about certain other aspects of one of the things we have to consider is the optimum viable use and for a listed building. And what's interesting about that is that doesn't mean it has to be the most financially viable, or the most financially generating the biggest profit for anything. It's about a balancing process about what is the right use for that building. So there normally would need to be some part of the calculation, wouldn't be just financial. Officers obviously looked through that aspect, and that is within the officers report. I'm just trying to call out what's in section 5.3, because obviously that's what our policy requires, and that is consistent with government guidance and advice. Obviously there is a viability statement with the application. The count, obviously, the officers recommending that they accept that this is the optimum viable use, but obviously if members don't consider that is because they think that the reuse of the site as a bum, if there is options, it has been marketed, etc., hasn't been fully or robustly challenged, obviously that is a consideration for the termination of this application. Just in relation to the 2 dwelling point, I can understand members' sentiment in relation to the scale and everything else, but there's 2 things to think about. One is, or 3 things really, but one is that our policy doesn't say it has to be a small property or it has to be below a certain value. It only talks about number of bedrooms. But what you've also got to think is that this is also about the need to facilitate people downsizing as well. So it shouldn't be assumed that just because it's a 2-bedroom property, it should only be looked at as a entrance to the market dwelling. There may well be people who've got quite well off, got valuable properties that may wish to actually downsize. So, and our policy obviously doesn't require it to be a relatively cheap property, and I would think that would be why, because actually it facilitates churn in the market. In relation to the gym aspect, what I'd like to highlight is generally the rule of thumb that planning officers take, and we do as an authority, probably because for the last 6 years at least, because I've been here, is that if a room is at the ground floor, we would consider that the proposed use is probably what they're likely to be using. It's less likely to be on the balance probability to be used as a bedroom. The current proposal proposes 2 bedrooms at first floor, so I think it'd be difficult for us to potentially argue that this was a 3-bedroom property, as a reasonable person looking at the plans would just look at it and see 2 bedrooms upstairs. In relation to Councillor Keyes' points in relation to trees and contamination, I don't think officers have any issues or concerns in either of those points, but it would not be unreasonable to impose 2 fairly light touch conditions in relation to either of those matters if members were to look to approve this scheme. So in relation to protecting the trees and in relation to if any contamination was found present. So I think if members wish to, we could impose those conditions. And I think hopefully I've covered all the points. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, I think so, Mr. Lee, although I think the point about downsizing normally requires the place you downsize to be smaller than where you are, would it not? Well, it's not my idea of downsizing, but I hear what you're saying, and I wouldn't probably propose that as part of the reason for refusal. But does any other member wish to speak? Otherwise, we need to vote on the recommendation, which I haven't actually put yet, come to think of it. So, for the sake of completeness, let us put the recommendation, which is in fact to approve. Do I have a seconder for that?
I'll second that, Chairman.
Okay, duly seconded. Right, members, I think we need a vote.
Sorry, Chair, just before maybe these with or without sort of the Councillor Keyes' points in relation to the suggested additional conditions I put forward. I don't know how the committee thinks.
I would say I'm going to add those as an amendment for this for the purposes of this recommendation, members. I think that would be reasonable. I can't think of anyone who would object to that as a condition to this recommendation. So can we vote on the recommendation to approve, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. The proposal is for approval of the planning permission and granting listing building consent with the additional 2 conditions as mentioned. Members, if you could just indicate for, against or abstaining, please, when I call your name. Starting with Councillor Durham, please.
I'm actually against the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
Against.
Councillor Morley.
Against.
Councillor Siddle.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
Against.
Councillor Miss White.
For.
Thank you. Chairman, the results of that are 2 for, 5 against and no abstentions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So that recommendation falls. So we need another proposal, which I'm tempted to do from the chair, unless anyone else wishes to come forward with something. But
no, go ahead, Chairman. Please do.
Thank you. I would like to propose that we refuse, and my reasons for refusal would be lack of information on alternative uses for the original use, certainly on the lack of an arboreal report. For concerns about the future of the adjoining business, should this go ahead. Mr. Lee, can I have any thoughts on those and the wording of them?
Dear Chairman, obviously, I think the arboriculturalist issue was something that we could deal with through a condition, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend that we put that on as a reason for refusal.
Okay.
The matter in relation to the other points, I think they're all valid planning reasons, and obviously, as always, obviously we've heard the debate, and officers would look to construct the reasons of refusal around those points, rather than specifically getting them here.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Jarvis who'd like to speak, but I would actually say I think the health and safety aspects in the farmyard, you know, we look to have people walking and cycling into the village where possible. It's certainly feasible in terms of distance. Whether it's safe is another matter. But I think its location next to a working farmyard concerns me.
Yep, don't have an issue. Like, it's a balanced opinion. If that's what the committee thinks, it's well within the gift. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Jarvis, please.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman. I was just trying to help come up with some reasons. I think when Officer Lee was talking earlier, he was talking about optimal use, and I think he was sort of suggesting that there could be more pursuit of perhaps an optimal use, i.e. it being used by the farm as a barn. I sort of read that he might be suggesting that more could be done in that area. I don't know whether that whether any of that constitutes a reason. Perhaps Matt Lee could advise us on that.
I think so. Yes, that's what I was driving at. Mr. Lee.
Yep. Thank you, Chairman. I wouldn't suggest that. I wouldn't say I was suggesting that as a reason for refusal. Obviously, the LPA considers that it's looked at that and has found it acceptable. But if members think that there could be further expansion, obviously, I'm sure members have familiarise themselves with the salient points on the file, and obviously it's covered within the officer's report. So if members think that it wasn't maybe as fully robustly dealt with as could have been, or all options haven't been fully explored, that would be a planning reason for refusal. Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, right, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Matt.
That's my planning reason for refusal. I think options haven't been fully explored. I have concerns about any impact on the business, given that the business is potentially, and indeed does, create a nuisance because animals have to be housed in the winter. I think the fact that it's next to a farmyard is inappropriate on health and safety issues, and apparently we can't use the trees. But,
Chairman, for a bit of advice, what I would say is that maybe rather than being reasons for refusal in the traditional sense, I would advise it be lack of evidence to demonstrate, because you know there's concern. These are reasonable planning concerns, and there's limited information to allay those. So rather than saying definitively there is a problem, it would be more of a lack of evidence to ensure there isn't reasons concerns. Thank you.
Right, that's my proposal, members. There is lack of evidence to address these concerns, and I think we need more evidence and further consideration. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Yeah, seconded it.
Right, too late, Councillor Hughes, you thirded it. Right, could we have a vote, please, Ms Bird?
Yes, of course, Chairman. So members voting for refusal, as indicated by the Chairman. If you could just advise if you're for, against or abstaining when I call your name, please. Starting with Councillor Durham.
For.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jarvis.
For, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
For, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
For.
Thank you very much. Councillor Siddle.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Miss White.
For.
Thank you. So the results of that are 6 for, 1 against and nobody abstaining. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Right, and again, we'll actually get the wording for the reasons for refusal in consultation with me, the ward members, the chairman and the officers. Right, moving on, and we are going to have to speed up, so that's down to me too, I'm afraid. Item 8 on the agenda is 19 Blind Lane Goldhanger, where we have just the one submission, which is from Parish Councillor, and we have Mrs Bourne, who's the Parish Council Chairman, who's going to read that. So could we have the presentation, please? Ms Bowles, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. So planning permission is sought for a double garage with a room within the roof space to the front of the existing dwelling. We've got the location plan and the block plan. You can see the location of the proposed garage outlined in red here. We have the proposed elevations of the garage. And then we have the proposed elevations in relation to the house. You see the garage here and here. And again here from the side. Here. We've got the proposed floor plan. The proposed roof plan. And then some site photographs. The proposed garage would be located approximately here in this photo, here in this photo, and here in this photo, with a ridge height of 5.95 metres, which exceeds the eaves of the existing dwelling. The garage is considered to have a significant visual impact. The proposed development would result in a visually prominent addition to the site and street scene, which would dominate the frontage of the site and form an incongruous development within the street scene. The applicant's personal circumstances have been taken into account. However, the weight attributed to this does not outweigh the identified harm. Therefore, this application is recommended for approval. For refusal. Thank you, Chair.
I'm glad it's not just me. Thank you. Right, Mrs Bourne, I'm sorry you had to wait quite a while. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm here. Hopefully you can see me.
Oh, we can hear you. Oh, yes, I can see you as well now. So you have 2 minutes, please, from when you're...
Good evening, Chair and Councillors. I'm Julia Bourne from Goldhanger Parish Council. As well as the Council, I'm representing the applicant, who is rather nervous to speak in this environment. I'm hoping all the other councillors have read the letter. My statement is as follows. The Parish Council want to support this proposed application The proposed garage, it does sit in the front garden on the north of the property and doesn't impact the neighbour's light. The aesthetics of the build will match the property, and there is precedent with number 1 Blind Lane, which also has a garage in the front of the property. The other Blind Lane properties are Pebble Dash rendered local authority and some ex-local authority housing. And it is not considered that the general street scene is impacted adversely by this garage and roof room. Blind Lane is a single track, low traffic road, and there isn't any visibility issues. The parents need the additional space for their severely autistic son, as well as their other son who lives at home, and daughter and her family who have had to move back to the parents' home, who have suffered financial difficulties during the COVID pandemic. The letter by the family describes the current difficulties and the positive impact that approval would have on the 7 family members living in this house. The particular family circumstances should be considered under LDP Policy 12, Health and Wellbeing, Section 819, Support Development of Healthy Communities. Also, the committee should consider Section 825, which states any planning potentially detrimental to health needs an accompanying health impact assessment. I would consider that refusal of this application would create a situation that is detrimental to the health of the occupants. The applicants are one of 4 households from the same family living in the village of Goldhanger. There are 4 Welleses in the village. And the community is a very important element of our village life. And the NPPF Section 8 is about promoting healthy and safe communities. And this application aims to keep families together in a safe, healthy community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, sorry, we have an issue with not voting on the... I thought we took the 2 together. Mr. Lee, Ms. Bird?
Sorry, through Chairman. We took the 2 items together, but I think we discussed clearly planning policy reasons and voted on the planning application. I'm not sure we actually dealt with the LBC, but that would obviously be a matter maybe we'll need to revisit after this item.
We'll revisit after this item. I don't want to interrupt the flow if I can help it. So thank you very much, Mrs. Thorne. So I will put the recommendation, which is to refuse. So is that seconded?
I'll second that, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Siddle. As always, I point out, just because you second it doesn't oblige you to vote for it. It's a matter of form, which is a puzzle to a lot of people who aren't used to this, and I quite understand that puzzle. So members, all right, we have Councillor Jarvis to speak, and Councillor Morley and I are the ward members, but I'm happy to go last. So Councillor Jarvis, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wondered if Officer Lee could sort of comment with regards to how much of the personal circumstances we are supposed to take into account, because I'm sure none of us would hesitate to see that there are special personal circumstances. But I know that historically we've always been told that we aren't supposed to take those into account. So I'd like his guidance on that, please. Now, I've obviously heard what the lady eloquently went through there from the parish point of view regarding the health points, and I think I need some guidance from Officer Lee. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. This section is dealt with within the officer's report. I think it's under the other material considerations or other matters section. The Westminster case law is clear that special circumstances of an applicant can be a material consideration in determination of an application, but that has been further developed, and it's clear that special circumstances should really be very special. It's most of us have some level of special circumstances we would put forward, and what this needs to be something that is well above and beyond the normal situation. And in most instances, personal circumstances of the applicant are a material consideration of very limited weight in the determination of a planning application. unfortunately, planning is a quasi-judicial process, and to a certain extent we do need to remove our personal feelings from termination of applications, which can be very difficult, but I think that is something that we do have to do as decision makers. We have to look at the one of the reasons for that is obviously is that planning is based on land, it's not based on an applicant. It's because we have to look at the long term, because we have to look at the life of the development rather than 5 or 10 years. That can be 100 plus years or something. I think that's, as I said, the officer's report does cover that probably a bit more eloquently than I've just tried to do that. But it does talk about, the officer's report says, whilst the LPA is sympathetic to the need of the applicant and his family, there is a need to consider the application against the development plan as material considerations indicate otherwise. In this instance, the information provided by the applicant is limited and has not provided a detailed rationale behind the need of development or why other alternatives such as a detached single-storey structure would not be provided to the rear, not be provided to the rear, or why the garage is needed and have been included, and therefore is not considered the personal circumstances of the applicant outweighs the conflict with the council's adopted policies. As obviously it's been highlighted by Ms. Bowles when taken through the presentation, the application is both for a garage and development above it, and obviously that 2-storey development at the front is visual. It's considered to be quite bulky by the LPA and quite dominant, and as I said, personal circumstances are a consideration and it has to be a balancing process, but there's been limited argument, for want of a better phrase, put forward why this is the only option or why this level of development is required. And as I always say, we have to take into account what is said by public speakers because it hasn't been validated, and I think the comments by the parish went much further than what we have been informed by the LPA. So I think those comments on certain points of personal circumstances should be given appropriate weight because of that reason. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, now I have Councillor Siddle.
Thank you, Chairman. I have utmost empathy for the family and for the eloquent case that's been put by the parish councillor. However, as the officers have stipulated, there hasn't really been enough evidence as to why this particular type of building needs to be produced, and there could be better alternatives rather than this incongruous, very large detached garage that's being built in front of the house, which would have an effect on the street scene, where if you look at the house and you look at what's there already, there is already a single-storey extension off the side of the house. So if there was a need for further accommodation, why could that not be built on or to go out of the rear of the property rather than plonking a big, great detached garage in front of the house? So I'm with the officers.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No, I think Councillor Morley is the other ward member. Not obligatory, but I'm offering.
No, I'm fine, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I know the area very well, obviously, as the ward member, but I've not in the last 40 years, but I've lived in Goldhanger and Totton for chunks of my life and cycled and ridden up and down that lane no end of times in those days. It's actually not as obtrusive as you would think, simply because of where it is. It's a little used single track lane. It's almost at the end of those houses, so people accessing that row of houses don't, with the exception of one, don't go that far. I assume the reason for the room over the garage is that it's the only way you can park underneath, they'll still have the parking at the front. I do hear the reasons against, but I think with the right materials, I think this could be appropriate, and I think the personal difficulties, the personal circumstances do sound very considerable to me. This is more than one thing. This is multiple problems and issues that the residents are having to deal with.
Sorry, Chairman, just like to clarity, that's not what the LPA has in front of it as part of the submission. No. So I would advise you not to take into account things that have not been submitted to the LPA for consideration.
Okay. Right. Okay. I think on design and appearance and impact on the countryside, I don't think there's as much harm as the officers do. That's my view. Councillor Miss White.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have to say I don't actually have a problem with this application at all. I know the site and I know the road. I don't know the applicants. I don't actually have a problem with it. So, I'm mindful to approve the application.
Okay. Right, well, we've had a couple of speakers for, a couple against, so I think we need to take a vote on the officer's recommendation, which is to refuse. So, Ms Bird, could we go through the roll, please?
Yes, of course, Chairman. Thank you, members. So this is voting for the officer's recommendation. If you could indicate for, against or abstaining, please, starting with Councillor Durham.
I support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Fleming.
Not here.
Oh, sorry, apologies, Chairman. Councillor Jarvis.
It's with a heavy heart, but I'm for the application based on what Mr Lee's taught me over the years. Thank you.
So you're against the officer's recommendation? Okay. Keys.
No, sorry. I think Councillor Jarvis is for the officer's recommendation.
Sorry, apologies.
I think he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the officer's recommendation.
For the officer's recommendation.
Thank you.
Councillor Keys, please.
I'm against the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Morley.
Against.
Councillor Siddle.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
Against. A bit reluctantly, but against.
Councillor Miss White.
Against.
And the results of that are 3-4, 4 against and no abstentions.
Thank you. I mean, I say reluctantly because I very rarely go against the officers, but it's just a question of balance, and I don't agree here. So I suppose if you don't mind me making a proposal from the chair, members, I'm going to propose that we do accept it. The reasons being I don't quite agree with the officer's view of the impact on what will be the countryside, the look, the street scene. I don't believe the impact is going to cause any significant damage, but I do think we should have conditions. I mean, I think the plans actually show appropriate matching materials, but I think we ought to have approval of materials down as a condition, and anything else Mr Lee recommends.
I will second that.
Thank you.
Through you, Chairman, the conditions I'd suggest would be plans, time, materials, as always, the conditions in relation to annex, the standard conditions, and that the garage is to be retained for car parking and incidental use. Thank you, Chairman. Well, ancillary use.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a proposal duly seconded. Can we take a vote, please? Ms Bird.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, members. So this is voting for approval as outlined by the chairman. If you could indicate for, against or abstain, please, starting with Councillor Durham, please.
Abstain, please.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I'll abstain. Thank you, Tara.
You, Councillor Keys.
For.
You, Councillor Morley.
For.
Councillor Siddle.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
For.
And Councillor Miss White.
For.
And so the results of that are 4-4, 1 against and 2 abstentions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much, members. Right, next one. Building at the Old Dairy, Broad Street Green. Hang on, everybody's disappeared. Hold on.
Sorry, Chairman, you were going to go back and clarify the listed building application.
Oh, yes, indeed. Sorry, listed building. Mr Lee, what do we need to do here?
Through you, Chairman. All I would say was that I know we went through the items as, or presented it as one. The matters that seem to be discussed were around the actual planning permission rather than the listed building consent.
Right.
Obviously, as members are aware, a listed building consent only looks at the listed building issues. It covers matters that would go beyond a planning application in relation to matters such as internal works, etc. But obviously doesn't look at any of the issues such as overlooking, I don't know, car parking requirements, etc.
Right.
So
this
in
is
relation,
the work on the building only.
yeah. So the only thing I would be able to say that would that members debated really would be whether or not it's the optimum viable use was for the proposed use, and that would still fall within the listed building consent. But as the committee are well aware, you know, there have been times when we've approved listed building consents while refusing planning permission and vice versa, because they do look at different matters. So, but from the debate, the only issue that really was discussed about the LBC would have been about the optimum viable use. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you. So, members, I'm afraid we do have to go back and vote on that. And again, from the chair, I'm going to put a proposal that we refuse the listed building consent on the aspect of optimum viable use, which I don't believe this is, personally. Is that seconded?
I'll second it.
Thank you. So, right, does any member have a desperate need to speak, or could we please go to the vote? Okay, that sounds like a vote. No, Councillor Jones.
Chairman, I do apologise. Would you mind just capturing for me again, summarising what we're actually voting on there?
Right, sorry. This is about listed building consent, which, as Mr. Lee was saying, it's actually about the work on the building, nothing else associated with it, nothing to do with any kind of amenity or car parking or any of those things. This is strictly about the work on the building. And as he said, I don't think we have recently, but it is quite possible to give listed building consent but not planning consent, but not planning permission, or vice versa, because you might think, well, the planning permission's fine, but not the damage to the heritage of the building, or vice versa, the work on the building would be fine, but it's inappropriate to have this use in this position, whatever. And my proposal is that I think the listed building consent should be also refused, because I think we haven't looked at the potential, the optimal use of the building would be as the barn it was built as in the first place, if that could be managed, and therefore I think this application for the listed building consent is for a suboptimal use, and I think it could be better used. Sorry, am I making any sense at all?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you. That was good. If you could sum up what recommendation we're being asked to vote on as well.
Right. Well, I'm making a proposal because the recommendation was to accept it, but then we didn't approve both recommendations. So, having refused the planning consent, and one of my reasons for refusing the planning consent was the fact that I don't believe this is the optimal use of the building, and so I would refuse the listed building consent for the same reasons, because I think it could be better used as a barn, which is what it's meant to be, a barn. So that's my proposal, and it was
Thank you, Chairman. So the proposal is refusal, yeah?
My proposal is refusal, yes.
Thank you,
I'm sorry if I'm making this overly complicated. Please bear with me. I'm not feeling up to par. I've had some rather bad news this week. I'm trying to keep my head together. Right, Ms. Berg, could we go to a vote, please? So that was, I believe, seconded by Councillor Keys.
It was seconded, Chairman.
Did I make sense? Did you get my...
Yes, Chairman. Okay. So, members, this is in relation to the listed building consent for the Bohans Bar at Church Street, Tollsbury, and the proposal is refusal, subject to the reasons relating to there not being optimum use of the building. Starting with Councillor Durham, please, if you could indicate for, against, or abstaining. Thank you.
I agree that proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
4.
And Councillor Miss White.
4.
Thank you very much. So, Chairman, the results of that are 6 for, 1 against and no abstentions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that listed building consent is also refused. Right. Building at the Old Dairy, Broad Street, Green, Great Totham. Oh, we don't have speakers on this one. Okay, I believe this is Ms Parker Haynes to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Outline planning permission is sought for the principle of the replacement of a commercial building with up to 3 dwellings. There is a verbal update for this application. At 4 p.m. today, a signed legal agreement was provided to seek to overcome the suggested reason for refusal in relation to the third reason for refusal, However, proof of payment for the check-in fee was not provided, and therefore we are unable to confirm that this is satisfactory, and therefore suggested reason for refusal number 3 remains. This is the location plan. This is the block plan. These are the existing elevations and the existing floor plan. And here are some photographs of the site. It should be noted that the existing site has a lawful B1 use and extensive planning history where the owner has sought to gain permission for the use of the site for residential purposes. 4 of these applications have been dismissed at appeal, and whilst the developments proposed are materially different to that of the current application, 3 out of the 4 appeals have been dismissed on the grounds that the developments would result in an unacceptable loss of employment land. This application would result in the unjustified loss of employment land and have a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the surrounding area. The development would result in an incongruous range of development and would not make an overly positive contribution in terms of social or economic sustainability. Therefore, the proposal is unacceptable and contrary to the content of national and local planning policies, and therefore is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms Parker Haynes. Right. Again, I just checked, Ms Bird, there is no one to speak. No public participation, I mean.
Yes, Chairman, sorry, apologies. There is no public participation.
Right, thank you. I'm frightened of leaving anybody out again. Councillor Keys, I believe you called this one in, so would you like to start us off? Yes, you did. Thank you. Would you like to start us off?
Yes, yeah, it's not a problem. Yeah, I've got a few things, but I'd like to hear what other members think as well. Now, I think there has been history on this site, as we all know. I think this is the best application that has come before us. It is brownfield. There would be less vehicles going in there, or smaller vehicles, which we have had just down the road. I know it is on a better road, I understand that, but it would be cars rather than lorries going in there. We need 2 bedrooms. Whether we can argue to have the 2 bedrooms, whether we can put that into a clause on it. They say it's unsustainable, yet we all know, or majority of us know, there was a pub just across the road, the Crown, which was built on, I don't know, was that 15 years ago, 20 years ago now, perhaps that might have been done. And yeah, I think this is not bad. It's got good public access, public transport, you know, that runs right by there. I'd be open to listen to what my colleagues have to say, please, on this, but I think the other applications that were put in are certainly not as good, in my opinion, as what this one does. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Keys. Right, I have Councillor Morley next. If you would like to speak, can you list yourselves, please? Councillor Morley.
Hi, yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, just to go back what Councillor Keys is saying, I remember the pub. In fact, that's where I proposed many moons ago. But it does seem to be, I mean, I'm not an expert, it does seem to be in the area where all houses are being currently built and where future ones are going to be built. So it does seem to be in the sort of closed area of housing. So I just can't see a problem with it, but I don't know what my other colleagues think. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, please.
Thanks, Chairman. It does, from a location point of view, it does look as if it's fairly nearby other housing estates. So I did see comments about it sort of harm to the countryside, and some of those photos do make it look like it's in the countryside, and therefore would cause significant harm. But I think I'm pretty sure I know where it is, and there's quite a few housing estates nearby. Unless I've got the wrong location, I don't think I have. Swifts, I think, is a housing estate nearby. So I would like the officer perhaps just to clarify that in terms of nearby housing estates, because that might affect people's weight they're giving to harm to the countryside. I think the other thing is just in terms of is loss of employment, is that an issue that's been raised? And I just wondered if anybody's got any details on that. You know, when was it last used? How many people are we talking about? If it hasn't actually been used for a decade, for example, then obviously it's questionable how much weight you'd give to the loss of employment issue. And again, Officer Lee might be happy to comment on that. Thank you, Chairman. Those 2 points.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, would you like to help us with those?
Yep, happy to, unless there's any members want to raise anything else. And I'll come back in a
well,
while.
I have got Councillor Siddle and I have Councillor White and I have me. Thank you. So Councillor Siddle then, if we're going to do this in one hit.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. This is interesting, an interesting location. I don't really see how the officers can say that it's going to have a visual impact on the countryside, because the buildings at the moment are far more incongruous with the countryside than 3 new houses would be. It is a brownfield site. I'm not sure how long it's been occupied. It has been for quite a while. It is right next to other residential houses, so it's part of or connected into sort of a small ribbon development of houses that comes off Broad Street Green, right next to it, just to the south of it. And then there are houses opposite it as well. So it already is in an area, and also the council, you know, it is sort of, the Haybridge Garden Village is going to be very close by. So it's an interesting one in terms of whether, what we should do about it. I'm quite open-minded.
Thank you, Councillor Siddle. Councillor Ms. White.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think we've refused. This has been to appeal to committee before, and I think we've refused it. When was the last? I want to know when the last time it was refused to appeal, because for me, we now don't have a 5-year land supply. And it is a brownfield site. It's a recognised brownfield site. So I don't quite see how a refusal would stack up an appeal. And I think for me, bearing as we are where we are, I think that the position of the application has changed. So I actually, I think we've previously refused it. I'm actually okay with it now because of where we are, because of policy and where we are now.
Okay. Right, my turn. I actually don't have a problem with it becoming houses so much as I have a problem with the loss of employment land, given what we just turned down at Beckham Business Park. And this is infinitely more accessible. And I don't know about the marketing or when it was last used. I'm going to come to Mr. Lee on that, because I just can't juggle all the papers and find things at will quite like you can in the chamber. And given that there is going to be more housing around it, perhaps there will be a future, not only a use as an employment site, but actually a need for an employment site that's so readily accessible. So that's my thoughts. Mr. Lee, can you run through all those answers for us, please?
I'll do my best, Chairman. Thank you. Firstly, I'd just also like to raise a point on relation to Councillor Keyes' statement about him considering this the best application that's come before us. All the previous applications have been refused, so it shouldn't be a case of just because it's the best, it must automatically be acceptable. There is still a policy requirement to meet a threshold, so I'd just obviously like to make that clear.
Noted, Councillor Keyes.
It is a brownfield site. Government guidance in relation to brownfield sites and redeveloping them is within settlement boundaries. This site isn't within the settlement boundaries, so I think to some extent that becomes a bit of a moot point. Obviously, it is a consideration, and we do allow the loss of employment land. Our policy accepts that if it's evidenced. One of the key aspects is to show that it's been marketed, and the officer's report goes through different aspects. But in relation to a couple of points raised by members, to actually currently the site is actually in use, so it is actually in use at the moment. I think there may be some confusion by members in relation to the reason for refusal. There's no actual reason for refusal in relation to sustainability or accessibility per se. So we are accepting there is public transport, and that hasn't formed a refusal on any of the previous applications and isn't part of this application's recommendation. So the fact that there may be public transport, that's why we've put there's other housing around it, etc., hasn't formed part of this reason for refusal or any of the others. What I would say though, in relation to Councillor's point about the impact on the character of the area, for want of a better phrase, this is something that has been discussed by inspectors previously and found to be unacceptable. It's not considered that proposed residential accommodation in this location would follow the pattern of development. The existing buildings, I don't think anyone's trying to argue, are of any particular architectural merit or something that need to be retained, but they are of a nature that you would maybe find in a semi-rural area. They are sort of buildings that you expect sort of like facilitate a transition into the countryside, and inspectors have looked at that and found that actually these buildings being on site is preferable in design terms than the provision of residential dwellings, which would significantly alter the rural character of the area and also would have an extension of the lifetime of the development on this site. Members, when we make decisions, we need to consider lifetime development. Obviously, certain buildings come, certain buildings go, but obviously providing a new permission on site and then having that built out extends obviously the life of building. It's something we've debated before at committee, so I won't bother to heavily carry on with that point. In relation to Councillor White's point, my understanding is that actually, I think this might be in the report, out of the 4 appeals where the inspector has dismissed residential housing on this site, 3 out of the 4 we were unable to demonstrate a 5-year land supply at that time. So I think that is a very, very significant material consideration when looking at this application, is that actually previously when we were unable to demonstrate a 5-year land supply, inspectors have still found this site should not be a site used for residential accommodation, based both on loss of employment land and also the urban grain relationship with the street scene, etc., to maybe a bit more clarity on the sort of the layout aspect. So I acknowledge we need housing to a certain extent. We are only 0.1 of a year short though, so it's not a case of we need to accept every application. This scheme has been looked at by an inspector, or not this scheme per se, but similar schemes. The principle of residential accommodation on this site has been looked at by inspectors and been found to be unacceptable. And those were at times we didn't have a 5-year land supply. So I think those decisions really do need to be given an appropriate weight in the determination of this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I have done it again. I haven't put the recommendation, so I'm going to do that now without further ado. That doesn't mean you can't speak afterwards if you need to. The recommendation is in fact to refuse for the reasons detailed in section 8 of the report. Is there a seconder for that?
I'll second that, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Siddle. Actually, I think most people have said what they need to say. Is there anyone who would like to come back on anything? Councillor Keith.
Yes, I'd just like to come back on that. We've just had an industrial estate. We've turned down an extension of an industrial estate because of houses around it. Yet the district council say that there's might be a need for work when we build more houses around it. So I don't really quite see where we're coming from with that, because industrial and houses don't go together with the noise and the car parking, which we just turned down. Yet we say this place is okay. So that's just one thing I'd like to say. And the other, it was a personal thing. I think this application was better. Whether other applications have been put in, I think this was the better one of what I've seen since I've been a councillor on the site. And as Councillor Jarvis said, there was Poplar Grove, which is right next door to the place, and there was houses built down there over the last, since I've been a district councillor over the last 5 years. We've added houses down that, and that is an unmade track. Thank you. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you. I'm sure Mr. Lee will put me right if I'm wrong, but B1 is office and very light use. It is the kind of thing you can, in fact, do, you know, as an ancillary business in your own home in a, you know, slap bang in the middle of a housing estate. Am I right there, Mr. Lee?
Yeah, through Chairman, basically B1 is development you could have adjoining a household without causing any issue, yeah.
Right, so, you know, we're not mixing this with any kind of industry or warehousing or anything like that. So it's not the same ballpark at all as Beckenham Business Park.
Yeah, that's correct.
Although what we were saying was that was mostly B1, wasn't it, than office use, but nevertheless the transport system and so many other things are very different here. Plus, it's in use, therefore we need it. That's my view. If there's no one else to speak, I think let's put the recommendation to the vote. So, Ms. Bird, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, this is a vote for refusal as per the officer's recommendation. If you could just indicate if you're for, against or abstaining when I call your name, starting with Councillor Durham, please.
On fine balance, I vote in favour of the officer recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I think on balance, I'm against the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
I'm against the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Morley.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
I'm for the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
I'm for the officer's recommendation.
Much. And Councillor Miss White.
Against.
So the results of that are 3 for, 4 against, and no abstentions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Well, that recommendation falls, so we need a proposal, which I'm going to assume is to approve it. Can someone come up with one, please? Don't all speak at once.
Yeah, there we are. I've got a few ideas here. I've got H4, H1, T1, good public.
Sorry, Chairman. I thought just before Councillor Keys carries on, you need to talk to the reasons for refusal. Just quoting policy numbers isn't going to be assist. You actually have to either talk to reasons for refusal or highlight where the benefits outweigh the harm.
I hadn't finished, but I will take your points there, Mr. Lee.
Well, that is the simpler way of dealing with it. So it's altering the character of the area, loss of employment, and we actually haven't got the legal agreement sorted, although we thought we had. It turns out we haven't. So,
through Chairman, obviously you need to highlight the planning history of the site as well in any while what's changed to overcome the harm that inspectors have found previously as well.
Right. Okay. Councillor Jarvis would like to speak. Is that okay with you, Councillor Keys? It might give you a bit more food for thought.
Yeah, I think Councillor Jarvis is definitely more educated on me, and I think he'll be able to speak a bit better. But I might be able to help him help him and others with some other bits that I have wrote down here, but whether they'll stand.
Okay, Councillor Jarvis, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I understand the situation we're in correctly, we're trying to come up with reasons for approval. Is that correct?
Well, it is, but it's reasons for approval that address the reasons for refusal that were given in the report. So, also, as Mr. Lee said, the previous planning history where they keep turning down what we're about to propose that we do.
Okay, I mean, I think we're probably going to need Matt Lee's help in this, but I don't think it seems to me on balance that it causes a harm to the countryside. It's a brownfield site, and there is obviously we've heard mention of the need for housing supply, which we're now short of. This is 3 properties. loss of employment issue, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, you know, there might be one man and his dog, or one lady and her dog, dealing with kitchen bits. I haven't heard any facts about how many people work there, but if the employment issue, it sounded like that was a concern. You know, that perhaps we don't have enough information on that, but I'd been led to believe that that it wasn't being used, but perhaps obviously Lee knows more about it than we do.
Can definitely
Right.
confirm, Chairman, it's been used.
Yeah, but would that be, Chairman, sorry, through you, I mean, you know, if one person is using it or two people, does that constitutes being used and for employment purposes? But, you know, okay, so I think in terms of coming up with...
An alternative potential, you know, it could potentially accommodate a lot more workers. It just depends on what's being carried out.
It's obviously slightly odd, isn't it? Because obviously the person that owns it clearly doesn't see it as being a good place to use as a business. Otherwise, they wouldn't be planning to build properties there. I think, yeah, I mean, the issue I mentioned, Brownfield site, and no detrimental harm to the countryside because it's surrounded by other residential areas would be the points I'd try and include, hopefully, as reasons for approval. I don't know if Matt Lee can assist on that.
Through Chairman, obviously I've discussed before, you know, reasons for approval, the case law's clear that this has to be member led. It's not, you know, I'm like with reasons for views, I'm happy to give debate.
Absolutely, yeah.
But the big issue I've got is that the point you've just talked about properties being acceptable has been found to be unacceptable by an inspector. And I've not heard any debate around why this benefits outweigh the harm, particularly taking into account that 3 of the previous 4 refusals were when we were actually able to demonstrate a much lower 5-year land supply figure. So the benefits of the dwellings is minimal, taking into account the planning history. You know, I think the big issue with this application is the planning history that's been refused previously by inspectors. You know, it's very challenging to put forward. I'm just struggling to see any real material considerations or differences between the previous applications and now that would help me assist members in coming to a reason for approval. And obviously I have to give my professional opinion, so it's very difficult in this instance, you know, taking into account the planning history, which I'm not convinced maybe given the level of weight that I would recommend it should be. Thank you, Chairman. And the
Brownfield site has much less weight because it isn't within the settlement boundary. And, so the sort of presumption doesn't apply, does it, Mr. Lee?
No, and also obviously points Councillor Jarvis raised on the final point didn't really cover the loss of the employment, which our policy doesn't really care, for want of a better phrase, whether it's 1 or 100 people, because the whole, and you've got to remember that I think it's something like 80% of enterprises within the district are SMEs, small and medium enterprises. So the actual fact is that small units are exactly what we do need. We don't need large ones. And, you know, reason we support them throughout the district is it supports various different commercial and employment opportunities through the district rather than just having large purpose-built ones, for example, in Heybridge or Malden or Burnham or etc., which would only be useful to maybe not the full extent of the district. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. While you digest that, Councillor Jarvis, can I, Councillor White wants to come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean, one of the reasons I had an about face on this one was because of the it changing character of the surrounding areas. At previous appeals, it was more rural and there was less housing, but as the years passed, the area has got more built up, and therefore I see no problem with the reuse of the buildings.
Thank you. I think Councillor Jarvis might find that very helpful. Or not. Councillor Keys, please.
Through you, Chairman. What about the site would have greater benefit to the local community if an alternative use was permitted? Got that. I'm just looking through the book now. Present activity on the site significantly harms the character and amenity of the adjacent area. I could probably use that loosely as such.
Well, I think you're struggling with that because it's...
Well, it's not a nice looking industrial area. So I think that does hound the character. I think a house would look better. That's my personal view. Anybody else?
How many nice looking industrial areas do you know?
Well, there's some do look better than others. You know, this looks better than an asbestos one, and vice versa. You know.
Mr. Chairman, my advice would be that members shouldn't be looking at the local plan now to come up with their argument for why they are not supporting the application. That should have been something that was clearly vocalised during the debate.
I realised the time, Mr. Lee, and I was looking at it. I've got the page open. You know, I'm not clued up in a planner, but I've got bits and pieces in front of me which we've been given to use.
But obviously, what I would highlight also in relation to the greater benefits, if an alternative use was permitted, you know, our policy allows for that, but we haven't. You know, we've argued in the report that hasn't been, and there is the planning issue that's found that retaining employment use has a. As I said, this is the challenging point: is that the inspectors have challenged this and looked at this. So it's very hard for me to give any advice that would really, because there is, to my knowledge, there are no real new material considerations since previous decisions. So obviously, at the end of the day, it's in the gift of the members, but it's very hard to give any clear advice that would be any help to members.
Okay. Right, Councillor Jarvis, thank you for that. Councillor Jarvis.
Chairman, yes. Yes, I was hoping to get some guidance there from Officer Lee. But I do appreciate,
not when he doesn't agree with us about going.
I quite understand. I think Councillor White, if I may say, I think it's really probably is helping us come up with the best reason that is different now to perhaps a previous application. So the area is just more developed, and therefore I think there is less harm to the countryside. I wonder if we could build on that, because clearly if it's in a rural setting, then there can be harm to the countryside. But if there are lots of other housing estates nearby, which perhaps there weren't on previous applications, I'm afraid I don't have that knowledge, but perhaps that other councils will have that, and that could be part of our reason for approving.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Right, I have got Councillor Siddle, but you know what we shouldn't be doing is debating a whole bunch of reasons for approval at this stage, given that we didn't talk about them earlier. Councillor Siddle, please.
So I'm actually going to back up what the officers are saying. There aren't any new houses in that vicinity at the moment. So there isn't any new houses in terms of that location and part of that Broad Street Green area. So the new houses are probably half a mile away or so. So you can't really use that as an excuse or a reason. So
good reason.
So I really think that reasoning is extremely weak and I would say often what the officers say to us is dangerous in terms of using that as a reasoning. So I really don't think the members are thinking about this in the right way on this particular situation.
Thank you. Moving swiftly on to, I think that's Councillor Durham. It's confusing that you come up as CC.
I just like to thank Councillor Siddle there, Chairman.
Durham,
it is me.
Yes.
It is me. Thank you. Yes. Yet again, we've got ourselves in a little bit of a pickle, haven't we? You know, we are straining ourselves for thinking of reasons to grant this that aren't going to get us in trouble at a later date. And I fear we're on very the thinnest of thin ice. So I'll support Councillor Siddle, and I'd really like to get this wrapped up. We've already been 2.5 hours, Chairman.
I'm only too horribly aware, Councillor. Thank you.
Chairman,
okay.
Could I potentially make a suggestion? Something I've really done before, and I don't want to offend any members if I do. So make this suggestion. Is that okay?
Go for it, please.
Obviously, I'm just quite concerned. You know, we seem to be bringing a lot of discussion that wasn't in the debate previously, and some of the points have been made about whether or not there has been any new development within the area since the previous permissions, and some members have said there is, and some members have said that haven't. Obviously, that information hasn't been provided to the committee. So I'm reluctant for members to really be members that aren't 100% sure of it, to be basing their opinion on either. So whether it might help, if this is some of the thought process of what some of the members have had against their objection to the previous, or the officer's the officer's recommendation, was that we could defer the item to the next committee with a report as bringing back that would explain what has or hasn't been approved around the site since the previous application.
Does that get into trouble for non-determined? Does that get us in any difficulty with non-determination?
The applicant would have the right to appeal on non-determination. The application is up for refusal now, so it wouldn't be a risk, and I wouldn't see it was in the applicant's best interest to appeal now and have to wait however many months, rather than wait in a month to see whether or not members agreed or didn't agree with the officer's recommendation. But I'm conscious that we can't be bringing new information into the reason for approval. So I would just consider that potentially that might be an option to at least be able to re-stimulate the debate maybe next time with more information. Thank you.
I think that may be very helpful. Councillor Miss White, we've only determined it insofar as, yes, we didn't accept the officer's recommendation to refuse. On the other hand, as Councillor Durham has pointed out, at this increasingly late hour, we are in a pickle because I'm saying we as a committee are finding difficulty addressing the reasons for refusal that we didn't like. Miss Bird, can you help us on this, where we are as regards the Constitution? Can we now defer it for more information?
Well, Chairman, I wouldn't like to be definite, but obviously members have voted on the officer's recommendation to refuse it, and so now they need to determine the application. If that determination is felt not to be possible, then if the officers advise that members may consider deferral, I would have thought that would be okay. But we may.
Madam Chairman, I'm happy to propose that it's deferred for further information. If anybody seconds that.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Seconded.
That's seconded. That was, I believe, Councillor Siddle, yes?
It was.
Yes. Sounded like your voice, yes. Right, members, can we please vote on a deferral so we get more information on what is here now that wasn't here at the last appeal? Yeah, Ms. Bird, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Chairman. So members is deferring for further information to be brought back to the next meeting. So if you could indicate for, against or abstain, starting with Councillor Durham, please.
I vote in favour of deferring. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jarvis.
No, I'm against that because I feel we've already decided we should be voting whether we approve it or not. But understanding we're having some difficulties.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
Yeah, I'm the same as Councillor Jarvis. Yeah, I'm against.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Against.
Bill.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
For.
Miss White. Councillor Miss White.
How many do we have against?
At the moment it's 3 for, 3 against. Oh, there's Councillor Miss White.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what to do about this, because I can see we don't have any reasons necessarily to approve it, but constitutionally I feel that we've already voted, so I'm in a really difficult position on this one. It's sort of unprecedented, really, and
well, we have been here before. We're just going to have to, we're going to have to come up with some reasons for approval that may or may not satisfy what we should have been doing. And as chairman, I'm obviously responsible, but if members are going to vote for something they can't then justify doing the opposite, I'm in your hands, members.
I'll propose we'll approve it.
I would just suggest that in relation to the Constitution, obviously, all that's happened so far is that the officer's recommendation has not been agreed. There is no, the application hasn't been approved. There's no been vote on that. No. Hasn't been determined. If any members have concerns about their ability to make an informed judgment, for example, where Councillor Jarvis raised an earlier issue about the level of employment, you know, he said he had concerns about lack of information on that, and my advice always would be you should fall on the pragmatic side in that respect rather than and policy side rather than against. But that's the thing. But if members don't feel they have information and we can bring that to them, it wouldn't be the first time I've suggested such a approach in a committee in relation to deferring it if there is additional information sought by committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, so we're just waiting for your vote, Councillor White.
Yeah, but my problem is that we've already voted against the officer's recommendation, and I just think, for me, constitutionally, I don't know how I can effectively do an about turn, because if we defer it, it could be an about turn. So I honestly, for the first time in my life, I don't know what to do on this one. I think. Well, I think I'm going to have to go against the recommendation. I only because I voted against the officer's recommendation. I don't see how I can change it.
It's your decision, Councillor White. No, if that's what you're saying, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, but I'm completely blown away by this. It's just something we've not come across before. Yeah.
Okay, well, we've been here before when members have been very keen to do, disagree with the officer's recommendation, and then we don't have any reasons to do the other thing. Right, well, that sounds to me like the deferral failed. So, come on, members, it's 10 to 9, we're not finished yet. Yeah, well, we've got that far, but what are the reasons? So, you've got to address the fact that
activity significantly harms the character and amenity of the adjacent area. That's one.
Well, you can say it. I mean, I can't. Members? You can say whatever you want to say.
Houses, it's got, through you, Chairman, it's got houses round it, and I think industrial roundhouses is a no-go. We've already had it today.
It's not industrial. It's not industrial. It's B1, and it's never been allowed to have houses there before.
Well, it used to have.
Members, you can. I give up.
And that's not a reason to approve the house that's been developed.
But it had lorries going in before when it was a dairy, which is still classed as a dairy, and it had loads of milk floats right over there, and that was significantly harmed the area, which it could go back to.
That's not a reason for approval.
That's still not B1, and it's not a reason for refusal. I appreciate your Councillor Siddle, but this is turning into a bit of a party. So if you could.
Sorry, could I just provide? Could I just provide some clarification on the location? On the location plan, it's solely the commercial building and the entrance, so the access that is outlined in red. The outline in blue will still remain as a commercial use. So there will be the provision of up to 3 dwellings amongst an existing commercial use on that site. The whole site will not change to residential as part of this application.
Oh, yes, thank you very, very much. That makes it even worse. Councillor Jarvis.
Well, Chairman, yes, thanks for that additional information there, which we probably should have spotted. But I think, are we happy, first of all, to second Councillor Key's recommendation of approval? I think it's, isn't there a sort of presumption naturally in the favour of residential properties? And if that's the case, I can't see, that this site, sort of does any harm with other properties in the near vicinity, and it's a brownfield site. I mean, isn't that enough for us to agree it? I know Celine doesn't feel so, but I mean that's what we're saying. Whether that's strong enough or not, I don't know.
That is what you're saying. The reason you can't really second a proposal that doesn't have the reasons for approval yet. So we're still at that stage. It is still going to be housing with B1 use nearby, which, as you say, we should have all spotted that, especially me. But anyway, thank you very much, Ms. Parker-Haynes, for that. And it's loss of an employment site. This isn't, a patch of, wasteland with rubbish all over it. This is an employment site where there is someone working. But if members want to say, look, we think that having the houses here outweighs the employment use, then it's within your gift to say it.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just clarify one point that Councillor Jarvis just said? There is no presumption of building houses, no. There is no presumption in favour of that approach, so that can't be a consideration.
Sustainable development, yes, but it's sustainable employment land now.
And case law is clear that sustainable development is what the LDP says, and the LDP says we should protect employment land, so that would be what the sustainable development. So the point is, we need to be looking at this as this application is in conflict with policy, in conflict with previous inspectors' decisions. So you really need to be looking at material considerations that weigh in favour of it. That's the only approach really I can give members advice to look in for a reason for approval. As always, as you said yourself, Chairman, it's in the gift of the committee to give it as they see. But right, obviously this will be used again.
Of course. I've got Councillor Durham. I'm having a sense of humour failure. I'm hoping you can retrieve something here for me, Councillor Durham. Always had a legacy man.
No joy here, I'm afraid. Can we just please move on?
Well, yes, but where to? I think we should defer it. Or you can approve it with reasons that just open the floodgates to everybody everywhere. Just like we keep doing with lots of things, really.
Well, I've made my mind up to approve it.
I know you have, but you haven't voted. We can't vote without the reasons for approval. And the reasons for approval seem to me to be that members feel the loss of the employment site is less important than the gain of 3 houses. Now, I think you'll live to regret that if we say that, but that is what you're saying.
Yes.
That's it in a nutshell, isn't it, Mr. Lee?
Yes, Chairman, thank you.
Yeah, I thought it was. Okay, well, if that's your reason for approval, Councillor Keys, we'll best vote on it.
Chairman, can I just clarify exactly what the reason for refusal is that we're listing, please?
Well, it's a reason for approval.
Sorry, a reason for approval. No, I do apologise. My confusion.
I know. Just well, what I just said, and nobody disagreed with me, although I don't agree with it, is that the gain of the 3 dwellings outweighs the loss of the employment land. That's what people are saying. That's what members are saying. I don't agree with it, but that's what the members are saying.
Thank you, Chairman. So, Chairman, do you want me to take a vote on that?
Unless anyone's going to come up with a different reason for approval, I think we'd better let Ms. Bird take the vote.
Okay, members, so this is voting for approval as for the reason outlined just by the Chairman. If you could indicate... Sorry,
Ms. Bird, with conditions, I'd suggest that they, in this instance, would be delegated to officers with consultation with Chairman and the ward members, because it's quite a complex, multi-layered application.
Yeah, well done, Mr. Lee, thank you.
Thank you. So sorry. So starting with Councillor Durham, please.
Can you just reconfirm what this vote is about, because it's just
Councillor
gone on
Durham,
too long.
we're voting for approval, and the reason for approval was that the gain of the 3 dwellings outweighed the loss of the employment.
No, I don't agree, and I think this is probably the worst of a load of bad mistakes that we've made. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, please.
I'm approving on that basis.
You're agreeing. Okay, thank you. Councillor Keys?
I agree on that basis.
Thank you. Right. Councillor Morley?
Agreed.
Siddle?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson?
Oh, against.
And Councillor Miss White?
I think I've completely lost the plot this evening, but I think because of where we are, it's going to have to be 4, reluctantly.
Thank you. So, Chairman, the results of that are 4 in favour, 3 against and no abstentions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, that goes ahead with those reasons for approval. Land rear of Hill Barn Rectory Lane has been withdrawn. So now we're looking at Fir Trees, Malden Road, Tiptree. Yes, which was called in by Councillor Siddle. I believe that's your ward, isn't it? That's Tottenham, yes. Back to my prompt.
Correct, yes.
Past that one, past that one, past that one, Fir Trees, Malden Road. Oh, poor Mr. McShane, we have a submission, but someone's still hanging around. Right, could we have the presentation, please? Ms. Parker Haynes, I believe this is down to.
Thank you, Chairman. Planning permission is sought for the construction of a 2-storey rear extension. This is the location plan. This is the block plan. These are the existing elevations. These are the proposed elevations. These are the existing floor and roof plan. These are the proposed floor plans. And here are some photographs of the site. It should be noted that the original permission for this property is subject to a condition that the occupants of the dwelling are agricultural workers. Planning permission for this new dwelling in a rural area would have exceptionally been granted on the basis that there was a need for a farm worker to live on the site to meet the needs of the farm holding. Policy H7 of the LDP relates specifically to agricultural workers' accommodation and seeks to ensure that the proposed development, in this instance extension, is commensurate with the needs of the agricultural enterprise. It is acknowledged that the countryside can only accommodate limited forms of development, and it is generally accepted that development in the open countryside should be strictly controlled. However, it is also accepted that at times the specific needs of a farming enterprise may make it essential to live at or very close to the enterprise, and therefore each case will depend on the needs of the enterprise and should not be based on the personal preferences or circumstances of any of the individuals involved. This involves the need to ensure that the dwelling is of a size and scale that is proportionate to the needs of the enterprise rather than meeting an aspirational want or need of the applicant. Furthermore, this application is a resubmission of the previously refused application 20-00522, which was refused as it had not been demonstrated that the size of the enlarged dwelling was commensurate with the needs of the agricultural enterprise. The proposed works remain unchanged as part of this application, and additional information has been provided to demonstrate that the extension is commensurate with the needs of the enterprise. This is detailed within section 5.1 of the report. This application is recommended for refusal as it has not been demonstrated that the size of the enlarged dwelling is commensurate with the needs of the agricultural enterprise, and the development would therefore be contrary to policies SA and H7. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, we have a submission from Mr. McChaney. Have I pronounced you properly?
Have you got me?
Hello, I'm sorry you've been kept waiting so very long. Please speak. You have 2 minutes from when you begin. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, councillors. Yes, I've kept and bred pigs at Fir Trees from 1984 until 2017, and I'm only given this up as I was living with my family at another address, and it was completely unrealistic to try to farm while not living at Fir Trees, especially when the sales were faring down in the early hours of the morning. I would like to reintroduce more livestock back onto the holding again to secure its future success. Therefore, myself and my family need to be living on the site. We have supplied details within our agricultural statement. My 93-year-old mother still lives at Fir Trees and would like to say that she is needing more and more daily care and company. And as time goes on, we'll only be needing more. Leaving her there on her own at night is very worrying. The house is needed for modernisation, as the kitchen is very small. See pictures attached to the application statement. and there's only a small toilet downstairs and one family bathroom upstairs. The extension would incorporate a lift to help with mobility for my mother and a separate living area and ensuite for her independence. The officer's report states that there are no issues with the design or size of the extension and there is no negative impact on the neighbours. The extension sits within the domestic curtilage of the property. Also, Braxton Parish Council and local residents have not raised any objections. Small holdings are a family concern and we want this to continue to future generations of our family. And there is a moral responsibility to care for our elderly family members alongside making sure the needs of the small holding business are met. And this should be considered in a fair manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, members, that's the only speaker on this item. I'm going to put the recommendation, which is to refuse. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second
Do I
that.
have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Moore. Right. Again, I have to say, it doesn't oblige anyone to vote any particular way, but it does put it on the table. Right, I do have Councillor Siddle to speak, and I've noticed Councillor White, so let's do it in that order, if that's all right.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so the whole thing, as the applicant has just described, and the evidence that they presented, this is to allow some multiple occupancy so that the H7 policy can continue and allow the owner of it, and they've been an owner of the farm since the 1980s, and also accommodate the whole family. So I would say that H7 has been approved, and therefore we should go against the officers and approve this application. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I've just been distracted. We did just move the officer's recommendation, and it was seconded by Councillor Morley. Don't worry.
Correct.
Don't worry. Right. Sorry, that was a sorry, missed it. Right, Councillor White, we can carry on, please. And we have Councillor John.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Unlike the last application, I'm really very clear on this one. I just think the officers have got this absolutely wrong. I think, you know, a lot of these farms all have extended families. That's why farmhouses are traditionally large. And I have absolutely no problem. I mean, there's no problem with the neighbours. There's no problem with anything else. If they want to increase it, I've got absolutely no problem at all. And I really don't understand why this is down for refusal.
Well, it's because of the ag tie, but I hear what you're saying. Right, I've got Councillor Keys.
Yeah, good. Yeah, my other two councillors have really stole my thunder, but yeah, I haven't got a problem with this. He's explained himself there. I know the place very well. It's just up the road from me, but yes, I haven't got any problems with this whatsoever, and I think I will definitely be voting against the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. And I've got Councillor Morley, and I think Councillor White might want to come back, or is that a legacy hand? But Councillor Morley, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I've known of the family an awful long time, and they have been farming, in particular pig farming, for as long as I can remember. So I can't see a problem with that. And obviously, with livestock, you need constant care. I know that well enough, being a farmer as well. Still, luckily, I'm one of the few left. So I'm against the officers on this particular one. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Jarvis.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, we've just heard, obviously. I noticed at the end of the report it's got reason for refusal. That hasn't been demonstrated. The size of the enlarged dwelling is commensurate with the needs of the agricultural enterprise. But, I mean, we've just heard, obviously, from the man himself, what he wants and what he wants to do there. And we've got animals too. And you do need to have quite large areas, look after lots of different animals. And I think, as Councillor Morley said, you often have to have them very close so you can give good attention. So I don't really quite see that summary from the officers. So I think I'll wait to hear other people, but I'm certainly currently would be thinking that we should be approving this application, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. It's actually because it's the needs of the existing use, not the aspirational use. However, Councillor White. Unless that was a legacy.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't see why an agricultural tie has to limit the size of a building. If the applicants say they need a bigger building and there's no problems, it's not they haven't got the room or the neighbours are upset, I don't see a problem. I mean, just to say because it's agriculture, you only, you have to have a particular size house seems very, very unreasonable. I mean, very unreasonable. I can't quite get my head around this one. Suitable those evenings for that. So no, I'm absolutely dead against the officer's recommendations.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. I agree. I think I agree with your view on the policy, but nevertheless, it is the policy, and that's right. Mr. Lee may well not agree with it himself. I'm not going to ask him the question.
Well, actually, Chairman, I think it's quite an interesting point. What you've got to, or for you, sorry, is what you've got to remember is that government guidance, policy, everything is quite clear that development within the countryside should only be allowed for exceptional circumstances. And when you are allowing an agricultural dwelling, that is an exceptional circumstance. It is because there is a functional need for that enterprise. And that is what, you go back to previous guidance before the NPPF, this is a well-established, point of planning principle. And that, as the case officer explained in her presentation, our policy and government guidance, which relates to the size of the enterprise. It's not an aspiration or need. It relates specifically to the size of the enterprise. And we have won appeals in my time. I can think of one that was actually in relation just putting dormers in the roof of a dwelling that we refused because it said it would increase the size of the building without there needing to be, or there hadn't been evidence there was a need. Sorry, it's been a long night. But what I would say, obviously, members, there is obviously a subjectivity with all these applications, but in this application, I think you've got to remember that this is not increasing the number of bedrooms. This is just making the standard of accommodation, for want of a better word, improved. But, as we discussed earlier about special circumstances and things, the personal circumstances are not really, in most instances, a material consideration. And the need is not about the applicant, the need is about the enterprise per se, because it's in relation to the special circumstances that were allowing an agricultural dwelling in the first place, rather than the personal circumstances of the need. And what I'd also obviously imply or highlight is obviously we have, over the years since I've been here, allowed a number of agricultural dwellings to lose their agricultural ties because they were very large, they were very opulent, for want of a better phrase, and that then meant that they were not appropriate for an agricultural dwelling in the long term because of people, the average agricultural wage is a lot lower than the average commercial wage, and that is part of the reason is that why it has to be, it relates to the enterprise rather than the personal circumstances or the personal wants of the applicant, because these dwellings are only allowed in exceptional circumstances, and if they do get too large or they're disproportionate, it may result in a need for us to actually release the agricultural condition in the future. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. I do understand, although that does rather beg the question, why aren't all agricultural ties, huts that only have single people working there? So that you have a dwelling that just supports the number of people you need to work, not the rest of the family. However, moving on, because I don't want to get bogged down in that. Councillor Durham, you did want to speak. Yes, please, Councillor Durham.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Because we're nearly there.
Yes, thank you. There is a well-renowned property not far from where I'm sitting now that has smacks of rather the same, and it's a name that will spread fear into the hearts of should-be members and officers, and that is Meadows Wood and Water, which was a grossly extended farm workers' cottage that had a tie. And then, of course, what happened straight after that property was given its permission to extend and become a 5-bedroom house, we started getting applications to revoke the occupancy restriction, and it just caused a lot of discontent in this village. And there is a need for agricultural worker dwellings, absolutely. But I just think that this is, unfortunately, another Meadows in the making, and I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. That's a fair point. Right, members. Oh, Councillor Siddle.
Yeah, just to come back, yeah, this isn't a very large house currently, and the extension isn't that extensive. It is just about going out of the rear of the property and enabling the agricultural land to be worked effectively by the whole family and to accommodate the whole family. So I don't have those same concerns.
Okay, thank you. Right, I think we need to vote on this one, members. So we have moved the recommendation, which in this case is to refuse. So could we take the vote, please?
Thank you, Chairman. And members voting against the officer's recommendation of refusal, if you could indicate for, against or abstain, please.
Whoa.
No, you exactly. That's
We're
wrong.
voting.
Sorry.
Sorry, Miss Bird. I'm with you in my head. I'm with you. We are voting on the officer's recommendation to refuse.
That's what I said, Chairman.
That's not what we heard. So never mind.
Oh, sorry. That's what I thought I'd read out. Sorry, apologies if I didn't say that. Officer's recommendation of refusal.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we're voting on that.
I thought you said we were voting against it, but never mind. Carry on.
Sorry, Chair.
I'm voting in favour of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Jarvis, please.
Yeah, I'm against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
I'm against the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Morley.
Against too.
Councillor Siddle.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
I'm going to abstain.
Councillor Miss White.
Against.
And so the results of that are 1 in favour, 5 against and 1 abstaining. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Siddle, I'm looking for you for a proposal, which I'm assuming is to approve, and with reasons for approval that address these reasons for approval. If you would be so kind.
As possible, and hopefully as succinct as possible. So we should recommend the approval because it has been demonstrated that the H7 requirements have been met by the applicant to ensure that the agricultural land can be worked effectively and accommodate that need.
Sounds like
I'll second that.
Okay, that's duly seconded. Councillor Siddle's proposal, duly seconded by Councillor Keys. Does anyone feel a need to speak, given that we've had a debate and most things should have been said? Excellent. Vote, please, Miss Bird. We go through the.
Thank you, Chairman. Members voting for approval as outlined by Councillor Siddle. If you could indicate for, against or abstain, please, starting with Councillor Durham.
Oh, hang on. Sorry, we need conditions. Can we delegate conditions to the officers in conjunction with?
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah, thank you. Right. Sorry, as you were.
That's all right. Thank you. So, voting for approval with conditions delegated to officers for the reason outlined by Councillor Siddle. Starting with Councillor Durham, please.
I will abstain. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
I'm for, thank you, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
I'm for, please.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
For, Tara, please.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
I'm going to abstain.
Thank you. And Councillor Miss White.
Absolutely for.
Thank you very much. So, Chairman, the results of that are 4 for, nobody against and 2 abstentions. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm going to say it as quickly as I can. Item 12, any other items of business the chairman of the committee decides are urgent? There are none. So with thanks and for the perseverance of the officers and members, thanks to all of you for your contributions, I draw a meeting to a close at 9:15. Near enough. Thank you all. As the meeting's now closed, members are advised not to enter into any further